The first thing Emma Whitmore learned about loving a king was that the kingdom would thank him for surviving what she kept from killing him. Every morning before dawn, before the palace bells woke the servants, before the guards changed posts beneath the black stone arches, before Alpha King Julian Blackthorne opened his eyes with war still trapped behind them, Emma lit a small blue flame in the private kitchen. No one used that kitchen anymore. It had been abandoned after the Western Wing burned during the Border War. The walls still carried faint smoke stains near the ceiling. The window latch stuck in winter. The shelves smelled of old cedar, dried herbs, and secrets. Emma liked it there. No one looked for her in rooms that did not matter. She moved quietly, her soft hands measuring bitter leaf, moonroot, and crushed silver mint into a black clay pot. The tea was ugly when it steeped. Too dark, too sharp, nothing like the sweet court blends served to visiting nobles. But Julian drank it, every morning, without asking who brewed it, without asking why the nightmares stopped before sunrise. Emma watched the steam rise and pressed one palm against the counter until the tremble in her fingers settled. She had not slept well. There had been another council dinner last night. Another hour of nobles praising Celeste Monroe's grace. Another careful silence from Julian when someone called Celeste the sort of woman a throne remembers. Emma had sat 3 seats away from him, wearing a pale blue dress that made her round face look softer, her white skin brighter beneath candlelight, her gentle eyes more tired than she wanted anyone to notice. No one had noticed. That was the skill she had perfected over 5 years. Being useful without becoming visible. The tea darkened. Emma poured it into the iron cup Julian preferred, the one with a small dent near the rim from the night he had thrown it during a fever dream and then forgotten he had ever done so. She remembered. Emma remembered everything Julian needed forgotten. That was another kind of service. Beside the cup, she placed the morning council notes. 3 treaty corrections, 1 patrol dispute, 2 widow compensation requests, and a sealed healer report from the southern barracks. She had marked the urgent lines in red, then rewritten the harshest phrases because Julian hated being told he had overlooked suffering. He did not hate the suffering. Not exactly. He hated the feeling of being accused by it. Emma had learned to make truth easier for him to swallow. Like medicine. Like tea. She fastened his black cloak clasp to the folded cloak at the edge of the tray. The clasp was silver, shaped like a wolf's head, polished every morning because Julian disliked dull metal before council. He had never asked who polished it. She added the small ledger last. The private one, not the royal ledger kept by the steward. This one held the things palaces forgot because they were too human for official ink. Names of soldiers who woke screaming. Children of dead warriors who needed winter boots. Healers who were running out of fever cloth but too afraid to bother the king. Families who had received letters so cruelly worded by clerks that Emma rewrote them before the grief reached the door. She touched the cover once, then lifted the tray. The corridors were still gray with early morning. Ashford Palace before sunrise was beautiful in a cold way. Black marble floors, narrow windows, silver banners hanging motionless from high beams. A place built to make loneliness look powerful. Emma walked through it as she had for years. Past guards who nodded but did not greet her by title. Past servants who knew she carried the king's tray but not that she had prepared half of what kept him ruling. Past the closed doors of the Luna chamber, where no Luna had lived since Julian's mother died. That door had been polished yesterday. Emma had noticed. A silver gown had arrived from the capital seamstress too. Not for her. No one had said that. No one needed to. She reached Julian's private study and entered through the side door, because she had been given the key years ago during the war, when he could not bear to be surprised by anyone except her. He was already awake, standing by the window in a black shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms, dark hair loose, his face handsome and severe in the pale light. He looked like every portrait of an alpha king should look. Untouched, unbothered, almost merciless. Only Emma knew about the half-moon scars at his shoulder, the way his right hand stiffened after long council sessions, the nights his wolf pressed too close to the surface and he whispered names of men he could not save. He did not look at her when she entered. "Put it there," he said. Emma placed the tray on his desk. "The Southern Healer report is urgent." Julian picked up the tea first, not the report. He drank, grimaced faintly, then set the cup down. Too bitter. It is always bitter. His eyes moved to her then. For one brief second. Not affection, not gratitude. Recognition, perhaps. The kind one gives a familiar object in its proper place. You should tell the kitchen to make it better. Emma looked at the cup. The kitchen does not make it. He had already opened the council notes. The moment passed without landing. Celeste will attend the afternoon reception, he said. Emma's hand stilled over the ledger. Will she? The council thinks it wise. Of course they did. Celeste Monroe was elegant where Emma was soft. Tall where Emma was rounded. Silver-tongued where Emma chose careful truth. She wore attention as if born beneath it. Emma had never envied beauty until it began taking the shape of destiny. Julian turned a page. You will make sure the reception list is corrected. It was not a question. Emma nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. He frowned slightly. He had once hated when she called him that in private. Now he did not seem to notice. That was worse. She moved toward the door. Emma. Her name stopped her. Foolishly. Completely. She turned. Julian held up the healer report without looking at her. Leave the red marks. They save time. For a moment, something small inside her reached for warmth. Then he added, You are useful that way. Useful. The word fell softly. That was why it cut cleanly. Emma lowered her eyes before he could see what it had done. Yes, she said. Nothing more. She left the study and closed the door without sound. Outside, the corridor had filled with sunrise. Gold light spread across the black marble, touching the silver banners, the closed Luna chamber, the path where Celeste would soon walk beside him in public. Emma stood alone with empty hands. Behind the door, Julian drank the tea that kept him human. On the desk, her handwriting held his kingdom together for another day. And for the first time, Emma wondered what would happen if one morning there was no tea, no notes, no corrected letters, no quiet woman standing behind the king while everyone else called him strong. The thought should have frightened her. Instead, it made the silence inside her strangely still. By the time the court began calling Emma Whitmore useful, she had already mistaken the word for love too many times to correct them. Useful had been soft at first, almost tender. Julian had said it after the war, when fever still burned through his blood and his wolf did not know the difference between enemy and healer. Emma had sat beside his bed for 6 nights, changing cloths, grinding herbs, reading casualty reports in a voice gentle enough not to send him back into rage. On the 7th night, he woke with his hand locked around her wrist. His eyes were wild, not royal, not controlled, just a wounded man searching for something that would not leave. Emma had not pulled away. It is me, she had whispered. Emma. His grip had loosened. His breathing had broken. Then, in a voice raw from pain, he said, Stay. So she had. That was how it began. Not with a coronation vow. Not with a moonlit promise. With a king too broken to sleep and a woman too loyal to walk away from suffering. After that, the palace learned her hands could fix things. Not glamorous things. Not things that made songs. Real things. Ugly things. The letters no one wanted to write. The widows who had to be told their husbands would not return. The treaty clauses Julian signed too quickly when anger made him careless. The supply ledgers whose missing numbers meant children would eat less by winter. Emma took those things into small rooms and made them survivable. She did not make them beautiful. Some grief should not be decorated. She only made them honest enough to be endured. Julian never asked how many nights she stayed awake after council, rewriting official sympathy letters because the first drafts sounded like stone. He never asked why the Eastern healers always had fever cloth before they begged for it. He never asked how the old border families knew to trust his seal again after the war. He accepted stability the way kings accepted sunrise, as if it came because he was powerful. Emma let him. At first, she believed he would notice eventually. That was the cruelty of hope. It made waiting feel noble. When Julian's nightmares lessened, he stopped asking her to stay. When his hand stopped shaking during council, he stopped watching for her at the doorway. When his voice became steady enough to command a room again, he began speaking over her suggestions as if they had arrived already softened for his use. Still, there were moments. Enough to ruin her sense. A cloak placed over her shoulders during a winter inspection. A quiet, you should eat, when she had forgotten supper. His fingers brushing hers over a treaty page and lingering one heartbeat too long. His eyes finding her across a crowded hall after a noble insulted her softness. Those moments were small. Emma fed herself on them for years. A starving heart can turn crumbs into proof. The court saw everything and understood nothing. They saw Emma near the king, but never beside him. They saw her enter the study, but always through the side door. They saw her handwriting in the margins of law, but not her name on the decree. They saw her white American face, round and gentle, her soft body wrapped in plain gowns, her quiet manner, her lowered voice. They decided she was harmless. A pleasant woman. A patient woman. The sort who could be trusted with keys because she would never use them to leave. She is very good for him, Lady Marin once said at supper, not realizing Emma stood behind the screen with a corrected seating chart. Another woman answered, yes. Useful girls often are. Useful girls. Emma had closed her eyes, then finished fixing the seating chart, because the northern ambassador would be insulted if placed beside the wrong rival house, and wars had begun over smaller pride. That was the shape of her life. Pain postponed because duty was urgent. Humiliation swallowed because someone else's need came first. Love hidden because Julian never named it, and Emma was too afraid that naming it herself would turn hope into embarrassment. The closest she ever came to asking was 1 year after the war, during the moon vigil. The palace had gone quiet. Silver candles burned along the western balcony. Julian stood beside her with no crown, no counsel, no witnesses. For once, he looked tired enough to be honest. Emma had gathered all her courage into one small question. What am I to you? Julian had not answered immediately. His eyes had gone to her face, then her hands, then the dark valley beyond the balcony. You are the one person who knows how to keep me from becoming worse, he said. At the time, Emma had heard devotion. Now, remembering it, she heard burden. She had smiled that night, softly, gratefully, like a woman who did not know she had just been told she was needed, not chosen. Years passed. The Luna chamber remained empty, but Emma was never asked to enter it through the main doors. Her keys opened Julian's study, the healer wing, the archive, the treaty room, even the locked cabinet where his sleep herbs were stored. But not that chamber. Never that chamber. Then Celeste Monroe arrived. The palace changed in one afternoon. Flowers appeared in the receiving hall. The silver banners were beaten clean. The Luna chamber was opened for air, its windows washed until sunlight poured across the floor like approval. Emma watched from the corridor with a stack of supply records in her arms. A servant carrying blue roses rushed past her. Careful, Emma said quietly. The girl barely heard. Everyone was too busy preparing for a woman who had not yet done anything except be expected. Celeste entered near sunset. Tall, elegant, bright-haired, dressed in pale silver that made the court straighten before she spoke. She moved like someone trained from birth to be seen from a distance and admired up close. Julian met her at the lower steps. He did not smile. Julian rarely smiled in public, but he offered her his arm. That was enough. The court saw. Emma saw too. Her hands tightened around the records. Celeste looked up at Julian as if power did not frighten her, because she had always expected to stand near it. For one terrible second, Emma understood why the council liked her. Celeste looked like an answer to a question they had been too polite to ask aloud. What sort of woman belongs beside a king? Not Emma, with her soft cheeks, tired eyes, ink-stained fingers, and heart full of practical grief. Not Emma, who knew which soldier woke screaming and which widow needed grain. Not Emma, who entered through side doors and made bitter tea in forgotten kitchens. Celeste belonged to chandeliers. Emma belonged to the hours before dawn. Julian glanced toward the corridor then. He saw Emma. Only for a second. Something unreadable passed across his face. Then Celeste said something low, and he turned back to her. The court moved around them like a tide. Emma remained still. In her arms, the supply records grew heavy. A page slipped free and fell onto the black marble. No one noticed. She bent to pick it up herself. By the time she stood, Julian and Celeste had entered the receiving hall together. The doors closed behind them. Emma looked at the polished silver handle, then down at the paper in her hand. Eastern healer shortage. Urgent before frost. She smoothed the crease with her thumb. There was always something urgent. Always one more reason not to break. So Emma carried the report to the archive, corrected the ledger, and prepared the palace for a future everyone seemed ready to discuss without her. That night, she made Julian's tea as usual. She marked the council notes. She polished the wolf head cloak clasp until it shone. And she told herself, with a calm that felt more like warning than peace, that a woman could only be useful for so long before someone decided she was replaceable. Celeste Monroe did not steal Emma Whitmore's place in one dramatic moment. That would have been easier to hate. She took it the way winter takes warmth from a room. Slowly, politely, with everyone pretending not to notice until breath began to show in the air. The first day after Celeste arrived, Ashford Palace smelled of fresh flowers and polished silver. Servants moved faster than usual. The chandeliers were lit before sunset. The Luna chamber doors remained open, not wide, but enough for the court to see pale curtains being changed and old furniture uncovered. Emma passed those doors 3 times that morning. Each time, she looked straight ahead. Each time, she noticed something new. A silver-backed mirror, a blue velvet chair, a tray of pearls delivered by the royal jeweler. None of it had been prepared when Emma sat beside Julian through 6 nights of fever. None of it had been prepared when she rewrote treaty language that kept border houses from turning on him. None of it had been prepared when she held his hand under the desk during a council panic no one else knew had happened. But Celeste had been in Ashford less than 24 hours, and the palace was already remembering how to welcome a Luna. Emma carried the Southern Healer report beneath one arm and the reception list beneath the other. Her pale green dress was plain, chosen because it would not draw attention. Her soft white face looked tired in the polished hallway mirrors. Her round cheeks held the faint flush that came when she had not slept. She had slept badly again. Julian had not. The tea had worked. It always worked. At mid-morning, she entered the East Council room to adjust the seating chart before the reception. Julian stood near the table with Celeste at his side. Elder Voss pointed to a map, explaining the disputed river lands. Celeste listened with her head tilted slightly, graceful, attentive, lovely in the way court liked women to be lovely. Visible without appearing to ask for visibility. Emma stopped at the doorway. Julian looked up. "Emma," he said. Not warmly. Not coldly. Simply as one names a tool needed for a task. "The seating chart is wrong." "I know," Emma said. "That is why I brought the corrected one." Celeste turned to her. Her smile was kind enough to be praised and distant enough to be safe. "You must be Miss Whitmore." Emma inclined her head. "Emma is fine. Everyone speaks so highly of how helpful you are." "Helpful. Not respected. Not trusted. Helpful." Emma placed the new chart on the table. "The Northern ambassador cannot be seated beside Lord Keene. Their houses still dispute the ransom debt from the war." Celeste glanced at Julian, then at the chart. "I thought seating beside rivals sometimes shows strength." "It can," Emma said softly, "if both sides know it is being done. If one believes it is accidental, it becomes insult." Elder Voss frowned. "That is too cautious. It prevented a duel last spring." The elder looked away. Because it had. Julian picked up the chart and studied it. For a moment, Emma saw the old rhythm between them. Her warning. His quick understanding. The private language of problems solved before they reached the throne. Then Celeste leaned closer to him. "Perhaps a softer arrangement would make the reception feel less political," she said. Julian lowered the paper. Emma waited. This was the moment. A small one. Easy to correct. He could have said, "Emma knows this court." He could have said, "We will follow her chart." He could have said nothing grand, nothing tender, nothing dangerous. Only the truth. Instead, he said, "We will discuss it." The elder nodded. Celeste smiled. Emma's fingers loosened around the healer report. "We will discuss it." Meaning her correction had become an opinion once Celeste entered the room. Meaning experience could be placed beside elegance and weighed as if both cost the same. "Of course," Emma said. Her voice did not break. That was something. She left the chart on the table and turned to go. "Emma," Julian said again. She stopped. "The healer report?" She held it out. He did not take it directly from her hand. Captain Marcus Hale, standing near the door, stepped forward and accepted it instead. Emma noticed. So did Marcus. His eyes flicked toward her face, then away with the careful mercy of a man who had seen a wound but knew naming it in public would deepen it. "Thank you," Julian said, already looking back at the map. Emma nodded. Useful people were thanked without being seen. That afternoon, the reception filled the lower hall with silver light. Celeste wore a gown the color of moonlit water. Pearls rested at her throat. Her hair was pinned in a style that looked effortless only because 3 maids had worked on it for an hour. Emma knew that because one maid had borrowed pins from her drawer. No one had asked. They had assumed Emma would not mind. She had not stopped them. At the reception, Emma stood near the side arch with a ledger in hand, checking names as guests arrived. She watched Julian move through the room with Celeste beside him. They were not touching at first. Then an elder made a comment about presentation, and Julian offered Celeste his arm. A small gesture. The room changed around it. Conversations softened. Eyes warmed. The court saw a shape it liked. King and future Luna. Power and beauty. A story simple enough to applaud. Emma looked down at the ledger before anyone could read her face. Beside her, Marcus spoke quietly. You should sit. I am working. You have been working since before dawn. So has everyone. No, Marcus said. Not like you. She looked at him then. Captain Marcus Hale was older than Julian by several years, broad-shouldered, steady, with tired eyes that had seen too much war to enjoy court cruelty. He had never been sentimental with her. That made his concern harder to dismiss. I am fine, Emma said. He did not argue. Loyal men often mistook silence for permission. But Marcus only said, the Southern report saved Aaron Bell's leg. The healer sent word. Emma closed her eyes briefly. Good. You should tell the king. He has it. That is not what I said. Emma opened her eyes. Across the hall, Julian bent his head toward Celeste to hear something she said. The court smiled as if closeness were a blessing bestowed on them. He knows enough, Emma said. Marcus followed her gaze. His jaw tightened. But he said nothing. That night, dinner was worse. Not because anyone shouted. Ashford cruelty was rarely loud. It had been bred too long in noble rooms to need volume. Emma sat 3 seats down from Julian, near the lesser advisors. Celeste sat across from him, where the candlelight adored her. The silver gown made every movement look intentional. Her laughter was low and well-timed. She asked clever questions about border alliances, just enough to prove intelligence without threatening the elders who preferred women to be impressive but not inconvenient. Emma answered twice when asked. Both times, an elder redirected the conversation to Julian before she finished. Both times, Julian allowed it. By the end of the meal, Emma had learned the shape of her new humiliation. She would not be thrown out. Not yet. She would be slowly reduced in rooms where she had once kept men from ruining themselves. After dessert, Lord Fenwick lifted his wine and smiled toward Celeste. A throne looks steadier when the right woman stands near it. A few nobles murmured agreement. Celeste lowered her eyes modestly. Julian said nothing. Emma looked at her plate. Then Lady Marin laughed softly. We should not speak so boldly. Miss Whitmore may feel replaced. A hush. Not full silence. Worse. The eager pause before cruelty discovered whether it would be allowed. Emma lifted her eyes. Lady Marin's smile was delicate, the kind that could deny harm if challenged. Celeste looked uncomfortable, but not enough to stop it. Elder Voss chuckled. Miss Whitmore understands her place. She has always been sensible. The table relaxed. A few laughed quietly, softly, politely, like knives wrapped in silk. Emma felt each sound land. Her place. There it was. The phrase court had been circling for years. Not Luna. Not partner. Not woman beside the king. Her place was side doors, bitter tea, corrected ledgers, late nights, borrowed hairpins, and gratitude spoken to the air instead of to her face. She looked at Julian. Not pleading. Not dramatic. Only looking. He heard. She knew he heard because his hands stilled around his glass. One sentence. That was all she needed. Not a declaration. Not love. Only enough respect to say do not laugh at her. Julian's eyes met hers. For one heartbeat, the room seemed to wait with her. Then he looked away. Enough, he said, but his voice was tired, not protective. We have business after dinner. The laughter faded. The damage remained. Emma lowered her gaze. Something inside her did not break yet. It only became very still. Stillness was worse than breaking sometimes. Breaking made noise. Stillness prepared to leave. When dinner ended, Emma rose with the others. She did not excuse herself too quickly. She did not hurry. She did not let the court see her wounded enough to enjoy itself. Celeste approached near the archway. Emma, she said gently, I hope you did not misunderstand them. Court can be careless. Emma looked at her. Celeste's face was lovely, concerned, and protected by the convenient innocence of a woman benefiting from cruelty. She did not have to speak herself. I understood perfectly, Emma said. Celeste faltered. Emma walked past her. In the corridor, her steps were quiet against the black marble. Behind her, the hall brightened again with voices. Ahead, the palace stretched cold and familiar. The Southern Healer report still needed follow-up. Julian's tea still needed preparation before dawn. The reception seating still needed correction because they had used Celeste's softer arrangement, and Lord Keene had already sent a sharp note through his steward. Emma stopped beneath the silver banners and looked toward Julian's study. For 5 years, duty had always arrived before pain. Tonight, for the first time, pain did not step aside. It stood beside duty and waited, patiently, like a woman learning the way out. The council laughed too softly for anyone to call it cruelty. That was what made it last. Loud insults could be answered. Open wounds could be named. A sharp word thrown across a table could be thrown back, if a woman had enough anger and little enough fear. But Ashford Palace preferred small violences. A smile held one breath too long. A compliment with its throat cut underneath. A silence from the person who should have stopped it. Emma Whitmore had survived many things by learning which wounds could not be treated in public. So after the dinner where Elder Voss said she understood her place, she did what she had always done. She worked. The court drifted toward music and wine in the lower hall. Celeste Monroe remained among the nobles, surrounded by pale silver candlelight and admiration that seemed to gather naturally at her shoulders. Julian disappeared into the late council session with 3 elders, Captain Marcus Hale, and the sealed correspondence from the Northern Treaty Envoy. Emma went to the archive. There was a sharp note from Lord Keene waiting on the clerk's table. Of course there was. Celeste's softer seating arrangement had placed him close enough to the Northern ambassador to be insulted and far enough away to think the insult deliberate. The reception had ended without a duel only because Marcus had noticed the ambassador's hand move toward his ceremonial blade and stepped between them with a smile that frightened both men back into manners. Emma read Keene's message once, then rewrote Julian's response. Not apologetic, not defensive, balanced. Acknowledge oversight. Reaffirm honor. Offer hunting invitation without making it look like compensation. She dipped her pen again and paused. Oversight. That word. So clean. So useful. A palace could hide so much harm inside words like oversight, strain, arrangement, duty. Her place. She pressed the pen harder than necessary. A drop of ink spread at the edge of the page. Emma stared at it, black bleeding into white. Then she took a fresh sheet and began again. The Southern Healer report came next. Aaron Bell's fever had lowered, but the barracks still needed more silver thread bandages and boiled wool. Emma marked the supply request with red ink, then added it to Julian's urgent folder. He would be in council past midnight. He would forget to eat. His hand would stiffen after 3 hours of signing. His wolf would grow restless if Elder Voss pushed too hard over border taxes. Emma prepared for all of that without thinking. That was the most shameful part. Habit could remain loyal after the heart had begun to understand betrayal. Near midnight, she carried the folder toward the council wing. The palace had grown quieter. Ashford after dark held a different kind of beauty. Moonlight turned the black marble blue. Silver banners hung like frozen water. Torches burned low along the walls, making every corridor seem longer than it was. Emma walked the familiar path with the urgent healer report tucked under one arm and Julian's corrected treaty note in her hand. At the corner before the council room, she stopped. The door was not fully closed. A line of yellow light cut across the floor. Voices spilled through the gap. Elder Voss, then Lord Fenwick, then Julian. Emma should have knocked. She had knocked 1,000 times before. Entered quietly, placed the documents at Julian's right hand. Left before anyone could pretend she had interrupted matters too important for her presence. Her hand lifted. Then Voss spoke. The arrangement with Lady Celeste must be clarified before the frost moon gathering. The court needs certainty. Emma's fingers froze near the wood. Julian's voice came after a pause. The court always needs certainty. Fenwick gave a soft laugh. The court needs an image, Your Majesty. Ashford has been without a visible Luna for too long. A visible Luna. Emma looked down at the documents in her hand. Her handwriting covered half the treaty note. Visible had never been the word used for women like her. Useful, sensible, kind, reliable, never visible. Marcus spoke next, his voice lower. Visibility is not the same as fitness. Emma's breath caught. The room went still. Fenwick answered smoothly. No one questions Miss Whitmore's contributions, Captain. There it was. The polite beginning of erasure. Contributions. As if she had volunteered small favors at garden gatherings. As if she had not held the war-torn structure of Julian's rule together by hand. Voss continued, Emma is valuable in her way. No one denies that. In her way. Emma closed her eyes. Julian said nothing. That silence had become a language she was beginning to translate too well. Lord Fenwick lowered his voice, but the door carried it clearly. The concern is whether she will become difficult if Lady Celeste is formally presented. There is affection there, perhaps. Dependence. She may imagine more than has been promised. The words moved through Emma slowly. She may imagine. For a moment, she was back on the western balcony during Moon Vigil, asking Julian what she was to him. You are the one person who knows how to keep me from becoming worse. She had built a palace inside that sentence. Now men in council were calling it imagination. Marcus spoke sharply. That is unfair. Voss sighed. Unfair perhaps, but necessary. His Majesty cannot have emotional confusion damaging a political arrangement. Emotional confusion. Emma almost laughed. She had organized 3 famine responses, corrected treaty clauses, prevented duels, managed healer shortages, soothed wounded warriors, rewrote death letters, and kept the king's nightmares from swallowing him alive. But the moment her heart might be inconvenient, it became confusion. Then came Celeste's name. Fenwick said, Lady Celeste is suitable. Noble blood, polished manner, excellent public presence. She will not embarrass the crown. Emma opened her eyes. The healer report trembled once in her grip. Julian finally spoke. Emma will not embarrass me. For 1 second, air entered her lungs again. Not enough, but something. Then Voss asked quietly, Because you will speak to her? Julian did not answer at once. Emma stood outside the door, held upright by a hope she hated. The hope waited like a foolish girl, like a woman too many years younger, like someone who still believed a king could be late and still arrive. At last, Julian said, There is nothing to speak about. The room fell silent. Emma felt the sentence land. Not the worst one yet, but close. Fenwick pressed gently. You are certain? If she believes herself attached, she is useful, Julian said. The word was flat, familiar, final in a way it had never been before. She has been loyal because she is good at being loyal. Do not turn that into something larger. Emma's hand lowered from the door. Inside, Marcus said, Julian. No title. Warning. Plea. Julian's voice hardened. She means nothing to me. The world did not shatter. That was the cruelest part. The torches kept burning. The black marble stayed beneath her feet. The silver banners did not fall. Her heart did not make a sound anyone could hear. Inside the council room, no one gasped. No one overturned a chair. No one said, That is the woman who sat beside you when fever made you forget your own name. No one said, That is the woman whose handwriting is on every law you are proud of. No one said, That is the woman you let them laugh at over dinner. Only silence. Then Voss exhaled softly. Then the path is clear. The path. Yes. Emma understood that. At last, with a clarity so cold it almost felt merciful, she understood everything. She was not losing a place. She had never been given one. All these years, she had been standing in the shape of a place Julian refused to name because unnamed devotion could be used without being honored. The healer report remained in her hand. Aaron Bell still needed bandages. The southern barracks still needed wool. Someone would still suffer if she let her pain take the paper with her. So Emma bent down. Slowly, carefully, she slid the urgent report beneath the council door. The red ink disappeared first. Then the healer's seal. Then her handwriting. Her last service entered the room without her. She kept the corrected treaty note. Not because Julian did not need it. Because he did. And because, for once, needing was not enough. Emma stepped back. One step. Then another. Her body felt strangely calm. Not healed. Not numb. Decided. Behind the door, papers shifted. Someone noticed the report. Marcus's voice cut through the room. Who left this? Emma turned before anyone opened the door. She walked down the moonlit corridor without running. Running would have made them think they had power over her pace. She passed the silver banners. The closed Luna chamber. The servant alcove where she had once hidden during Julian's worst winter fever because he had begged her not to leave but did not want the council to know. She did not stop. At the archive, she placed the treaty note on the central desk. Uncorrected sections visible. Problems circled but unsolved. Let them see the unfinished work. Let them discover that the woman who meant nothing had been the margin between order and collapse. Then she went to the private kitchen. The blue flame had gone out. The black clay pot sat clean on the shelf. Tomorrow's bitter leaf waited in its jar. Emma took the jar down and held it in both hands. For years, she had measured his sleep carefully. Too little, and nightmares returned. Too much, and his wolf woke dull. She had known the exact balance. She had known the shape of his suffering more intimately than he knew the shape of her hope. She set the jar back, closed the cabinet, locked it, then placed the key on the table. Not hidden, not dramatic, just no longer hers. Only then did her hands begin to shake. Emma looked at them with mild surprise. Soft hands, the court called them. Harmless hands. Useful hands. Hands that had learned the weight of ledgers, medicine jars, cloak clasps, death letters, fever cloth, and a king's broken nights. They were empty now. The emptiness felt terrifying. It also felt clean. In her room, the candle beside her bed had burned low. The space was small, practical, too modest for a woman who had lived 5 years inside a king's shadow. A blue dress hung over the chair. A stack of unsigned condolence letters waited near the window. The Luna ring Julian had never formally placed on her finger, but had once left in her keeping until the time was right, rested in a small velvet box inside her drawer. The time had never been right, because he had never meant to choose it. Emma opened the drawer, took out the box. For a long moment, she looked at it. Then she opened it. The ring was beautiful. Silver, black diamond, inner band carved with Ashford wolves. A promise without courage. She did not cry. She had thought she might. Instead, she placed the ring on the desk beside the palace keys, the spare cloak clasp, and the ledger of invisible duties. One by one, orderly, calm, a life returned by inventory. Outside, somewhere in the council wing, men were probably still speaking of the path being clear. They were right. It was, but not the one they imagined. Emma sat at the desk and took a blank sheet of paper. Her hand hovered over it. A farewell letter would have been easy. A wounded sentence. A final accusation. Something Julian could read and hold and turn into proof that she had still wanted him to understand. She folded the blank page instead. No letter. No explanation. No plea. If 5 years had not taught him her value, one page would not. The palace clock struck 2. Emma rose, opened the wardrobe, took out a plain traveling cloak. By morning, everyone would know what Julian had said. By morning, perhaps they would wonder whether she had heard. By morning, he might reach for the tea, for the notes, for the woman he had made invisible. By morning, she would be gone. And for the first time in 5 years, Emma Whitmore let duty wait while she chose herself. Emma Whitmore did not begin by packing a bag. That would have made leaving feel dramatic. It was not dramatic. It was arithmetic. 1 ring. For keys. 1 cloak clasp. 1 ledger. 1 recipe. 5 years of invisible labor placed on a desk so neatly that no one could pretend she had broken apart in the room. She moved through her chamber with a stillness that would have frightened anyone who loved her correctly. No one came. The palace beyond her door remained awake in distant pieces. A guard's boots passed once down the corridor. Somewhere below, servants cleaned wine glasses from the dinner where everyone had laughed softly at her place. In the council wing, men still spoke beneath gold light about Celeste Monroe, Frost Moon presentations, public image, and the clean path Julian had made by saying she meant nothing. Emma folded her pale blue dress first. Not the one she had worn at dinner. That one lay across the chair, smelling faintly of candle smoke and humiliation. She left it there. Some garments deserved to remain with the night that ruined them. She packed 2 plain gowns, 1 wool shawl, a comb, a small purse of coins, and the old healer's knife she used for cutting herbs. Not a weapon, not in any heroic sense. A practical blade with a worn bone handle. Useful, she thought, then stopped. The word no longer belonged to her. She opened the bottom drawer and took out the black leather ledger. For a moment, she almost placed it in her satchel. It held too much. Names, shortages, old promises, payments delayed because noble houses argued over pride. Notes about Julian's nightmares written in a code only she understood. The exact sleep-tea balance that kept him from waking with his wolf in his throat. Emma touched the cover, then set it on the desk beside the lunar ring. Let him see the weight of what nothing had been carrying. But the tea recipe was different. She removed that page carefully. not to keep it, not to punish him. Because some knowledge, once handed to the careless, became another way for them to avoid understanding what they had lost. Julian could find another remedy. He could ask a healer. He could learn, for once, the cost of being kept alive by someone he had not honored. She folded the recipe once, then again, and fed it to the candle flame. The paper caught slowly. Bitter leaf, moonroot, silver mint. All of it curled into black. Emma watched until the ash collapsed. Her hands had stopped shaking. That was good. Shaking would slow her. She took the palace keys next. One opened Julian's study. One opened the archive. One opened the healer supply cabinet. One opened the private kitchen. She placed them in a straight line. The study key first. Then archive. Then healer supply. Then kitchen. Order mattered. If no one had ever seen the structure of her devotion, they would at least see the structure of her absence. The spare cloak clasp went beside them. A silver wolf's head, polished bright. She had cleaned it every morning because Julian disliked dull metal before council. Let it dull now. The lunar ring remained inside its velvet box, open. Silver. Black diamond. Ashford wolves carved inside. A future that had been kept waiting until it became evidence. Emma looked at it without touching. She wondered whether Celeste would wear something grander. Probably. Celeste belonged to public silver. Emma had belonged to locked drawers. No longer. At the far side of the room, the unsigned condolence letters waited near the window. 3 families. 3 dead warriors. 3 griefs not yet softened into language. Emma walked to them. This was the only part that hurt differently. Julian could suffer his own disorder. The council could trip over its polished cruelty. But grieving families had not called her nothing. She sat down and finished the letters. All 3. Slowly. Carefully. No royal coldness. No empty honor. She wrote as if the dead had been loved because they had. She wrote as if the living would read the words more than once because they would. When she finished, she sealed each letter and marked the delivery names clearly. Then she placed them on top of the ledger. Her final mercy, not for Julian, for the people beneath his crown. The palace clock struck 3. Emma stood. Her room looked almost untouched. That was important. She did not want shattered glass. No torn curtains. No spilled ink. Anger would have been too easy for them to dismiss. They would say she had been emotional, confused, overattached, a woman who imagined more than was promised. So she left order. Order was harder to insult. She washed her face in the basin. The water was cold. Her reflection looked back from the small mirror above the stand. White skin pale from sleeplessness, round cheeks softer than court admired, eyes gentle and older than they had been yesterday. Not beautiful like Celeste. Not queenly like the council wanted. Still herself. That had to be enough. Emma pinned her hair simply, fastened the plain traveling cloak at her throat, and lifted the small satchel. Then she looked once at the room. 5 years had passed through this space without leaving much proof. A narrow bed, a writing desk, a wardrobe, a window facing the east courtyard. She had made herself small here so Julian's life could take up more room. Never again. At the door, she stopped. Not because she wanted to stay, because leaving deserved to be conscious. She placed her palm against the wood and listened. No footsteps. No voice calling her name. No king realizing too soon. Good. Mercy would have been dangerous if it arrived wearing his face. Emma opened the door and stepped into the corridor. Ashford Palace before dawn was colder than she had ever known it. Or perhaps she was simply walking through it without purpose for him, and that made the cold honest. She moved past the servant alcove, past the closed Luna chamber, where fresh silver curtains waited for a woman chosen openly. Past Julian's study. The door stood shut. Light still glowed beneath it. He was awake. For one breath, Emma stopped. Behind that door, he might be reading the healer report she had slid across the threshold. He might be speaking of Celeste. He might be drinking the last tea she would ever make him. He might not be thinking of her at all. She placed her hand near the study door. Not on it. Near it. The old habit rose. Enter quietly. Check the cup. Move the ledger to his right. Warn him that Lord Keene would need answering before noon. Tell him his hand would hurt if he kept writing without rest. She lowered her hand. No. Nothing did not knock. Nothing did not serve. Nothing did not stay. Emma walked on. At the private kitchen, she unlocked the door for the last time and entered. The small room waited in darkness. She did not light the blue flame. She placed the kitchen key on the center table where she had left the herb cabinet key earlier, then looked at the shelf holding the black clay pot. For 5 years, every morning had begun here. Bitter steam, careful measures, silent devotion. A king kept human and never told why. Emma took the black clay pot down, held it. It was heavier than she remembered. A ridiculous thing to grieve. And yet grief rarely cared what looked ridiculous. She set the pot gently in the sink. Not broken, not destroyed, simply emptied. Then she left. The healer gate lay at the eastern side of the palace, used by servants, medicine wagons, and wounded patrols brought in before the court could see blood. It was narrow, iron, and rarely watched closely. Tonight, a young guard stood there half asleep beneath a torch. Samuel Reed. Emma knew his name because his mother had once needed medicine credit after his father died. She knew his younger sister coughed in winter. She knew he pretended not to fear horses after a patrol accident. He straightened when he saw her. Miss Whitmore. Emma pulled the hood of her cloak lower. Good morning, Samuel. His eyes moved to the satchel, then to her face. It is not morning yet. No, Emma said. Not quite. He looked uncertainly toward the palace. Are you going to the healer village? Farther. A pause. Does His Majesty know? The question touched nothing soft in her. That surprised her. No, Samuel swallowed. Should I call someone? Emma looked at him. Not sharply, only clearly. The king no longer requires me. The words entered the cold air without breaking. Samuel went pale. He had been in the lower hall sometimes. He knew enough. Most servants did. People always knew more than rulers believed. His hand tightened on the gate bar. Miss Whitmore, she softened. Your mother's winter medicine credit was approved last week. It is in the Eastern Ledger. If anyone says otherwise, ask Captain Hale to look under my red mark. His throat moved. You are still thinking of that? Yes. Because caring was not the same as staying. That was the lesson she wanted to keep. Samuel unlocked the gate. The iron groaned softly. Too loud. Not loud enough to wake a king who had stopped listening years ago. Emma stepped through. The air outside smelled of wet earth and pine. The road beyond the healer gate sloped down toward the dark valley, where dawn had not yet touched the horizon. Behind her, Ashford Palace rose black and silver against the sky. Beautiful. Cold. Already less hers than it had been a minute ago. Samuel stood inside the gate, eyes shining with worry he had no right to spend and too much kindness to hide. Where will you go? He asked. Emma looked east. There were healer villages beyond the lower woods. Neutral roads past that. Border towns where no one knew whether she had once kept an alpha king from falling apart. Somewhere, she said quietly. I am not nothing. Samuel opened his mouth, but no words came. Good. Words were often how people tried to pull women back into places that had taught them pain. Emma walked. Not quickly, not slowly, steadily. The hem of her cloak brushed the damp grass. Her satchel rested against her side. Her hands were empty except for the choice she had finally made. Behind her, the gate closed. That sound should have felt like an ending. Instead, it felt like the first honest sentence of her life. She did not look back. By morning, Julian would reach for tea and find the cup wrong. He would call for notes and find no fresh handwriting in the margins. He would send for Emma and hear silence answer before any servant dared to. By morning, the lunar ring would gleam on her desk. The keys would wait in a line. The ledger would sit open beneath 3 completed condolence letters. By morning, perhaps he would remember what he had said. She means nothing to me. Emma walked into the dark before dawn with no farewell, no tears left for witnesses, and no promise to become cruel, just because cruelty had finally released her. The eastern road opened beneath her feet. For the first time in 5 years, no one needed her before sunrise. The emptiness was enormous. So was the freedom. Julian Blackthorne noticed the missing tea before he noticed the missing woman. That was how the first punishment arrived. Not with grief, with irritation. The morning bells had not yet finished ringing when he entered his private study, one hand already pressing against the stiffness in his right wrist. He had slept badly. Not terribly. Not like the years after the war. But badly enough that his wolf had paced beneath his skin before dawn, restless and sharp. The desk was wrong. He saw it before he understood it. The iron cup sat there, but the steam was wrong. Too pale. Too sweet. The scent held honey and lavender, a court blend prepared by someone who thought a king's insomnia could be softened by pleasant things. Julian stared at it. Who made this? The servant near the door bowed quickly. The kitchen, Your Majesty. The kitchen. Yes. He picked up the cup and brought it near his mouth. The smell turned his stomach. Not because it was foul, because it was false. He set it down untouched. Where is Emma? The servant hesitated. Only a breath. But kings learned hesitation the way wolves learned blood. I am not certain, Your Majesty. Julian looked at him then. Fully. The young man paled. What do you mean? You are not certain. She was not in the private kitchen this morning. Julian waited. The servant waited too, as if another explanation might arrive between them and save him. None did. Julian looked at the desk again. The council notes were stacked, but the margins were clean. No red marks. No softened phrasing. No small correction beside Lord Keen's name warning, do not seat near North Envoy before apology. No private ledger. No cloak clasp polished beside his folded black cloak. Nothing where Emma usually left order before anyone else woke. A slow irritation moved through him. Then discomfort. Then something he refused to name. She is ill, he said. It was not a question. The servant lowered his eyes. I can ask the healer wing. Do that. The servant fled. Julian remained standing beside the desk. He did not sit. The study felt too large. That was absurd. It had always been large. Blackwood shelves. Tall windows. Silver Ashford seal above the hearth. A king's room built to make one man seem unshakable. This morning, it looked unfinished. He opened the council folder. The first page was wrong. Not inaccurate. Worse. Unprepared. The treaty response to Lord Keene had not been rewritten. The Southern Healer report lay on top, marked urgent in red, but no supply orders had been drafted beneath it. Widow compensation requests remained in clerk language, cold and sharp enough to wound the families twice. Julian frowned. Emma never left work half done. The thought came easily. Too easily. He heard himself think it and disliked the dependence inside it. Before he could follow that thought further, Elder Voss entered with 2 council members and Celeste Monroe behind them. Celeste wore pale blue this morning, not silver. Softer. Perhaps strategic. Perhaps simply beautiful. Her hair was pinned elegantly, her face composed with the careful concern of a woman entering a room already tense. Your Majesty, Voss said, bowing. The Frost Moon presentation schedule requires approval. Julian looked down at the unmarked notes. Later. Voss paused. The envoy leaves at noon. Then he can wait until noon. Celeste's gaze moved to the untouched cup. Did you not sleep? Julian did not answer. She stepped a little closer. I can have the kitchen make something stronger. No. The word came sharper than he intended. Celeste stopped. The room noticed. Julian closed the folder. Where is Emma? Voss blinked once. Miss Whitmore. Yes, Miss Whitmore. Celeste folded her hands. I have not seen her this morning. She may be in the archive, Voss said. She is often there. Julian turned to the servant who had just returned from the hall, breathless. Well, the servant swallowed. The healer wing has not seen her. Julian's jaw tightened. Archive. The servant disappeared again. Council waited. Julian hated waiting in front of witnesses. He hated more that he knew exactly how Emma would have filled the space. She would have placed the corrected note on his right. Touched the second page once, because that meant he should read it before speaking. Reminded him quietly that Lord Keene needed respect before instruction. Then withdrawn before the council remembered to resent her usefulness. Useful. The word struck him strangely, as if it had returned from last night carrying teeth. He looked at Marcus Hale, who stood near the door with the Southern report in his hand. Marcus had not spoken since entering. That was unusual. You have something to say? Julian asked. Marcus's face remained controlled. No, Your Majesty. The title was deliberate. Julian heard it. His irritation sharpened. Then why are you looking at me like that? Marcus lifted his eyes. For years, he had been loyal enough to speak carefully. This morning, careful looked like restraint under strain. I was wondering, Marcus said, whether Miss Whitmore slept at all before leaving the report under the council door. The room cooled. Celeste looked down. Voss cleared his throat. Julian's memory tightened around the previous night. The healer report sliding under the door. Marcus asking who left it. His own words before that. She is useful. Do not turn that into something larger. She means nothing to me. The sentence did not feel important in memory the way it must have sounded aloud. It had been said to end discussion, to protect political clarity, to stop the elders from making Emma into a complication, not to wound her, not to be heard. Julian looked toward the study door. She heard. Marcus said nothing. That was answer. Celeste inhaled quietly. Voss looked deeply uncomfortable. Julian stood very still. The servant returned. She is not in the archive, Your Majesty. Her room. I sent someone already. Send again. The servant bowed and hurried away. Julian looked at the untouched tea. His head had begun to ache. The wolf beneath his skin had stopped pacing. That was worse. It was listening. A few minutes later, the palace became too quiet. Not outwardly. Servants still moved. The council still breathed. Outside the windows, the courtyard filled with morning light. But beneath it, something had gone silent. The way a forest falls silent before danger steps into view. The servant came back pale. Your Majesty. Julian turned slowly. Speak. Miss Whitmore is not in her chamber. Voss exhaled. Celeste pressed a hand to her throat. Julian felt nothing for 1 second. A clean blank. Then he walked out. No order. No excuse. No crown. The council followed at a distance. Marcus came closest. Celeste hesitated, then followed too. Emma's room was at the end of the Eastern servants' corridor, though she had never truly been a servant. Not officially. Not privately. Not publicly enough to be anything else. Julian had not entered it in months. That realization arrived at the door and stood there like accusation. He opened it himself. The room was clean. Terribly clean. Morning light fell across a narrow bed, a wooden chair, a writing desk, and a window facing the east courtyard. No shattered glass. No torn fabric. No spilled ink. Nothing that would allow anger to be dismissed as hysteria. Only order. Julian stepped inside. The first thing he saw was the lunar ring, open in its velvet box. Silver and black diamond. The ring he had once given her to keep until the time was right. The time. His throat closed. Beside it lay 4 keys in a straight line. Study. Archive. Healer supply cabinet. Private kitchen. The spare cloak clasp sat near them, polished bright enough to catch the light. The black leather ledger rested beneath 3 sealed condolence letters. Marcus entered behind him and stopped. God, he said softly. Julian did not look back. He reached for the ledger. The first page opened under his hand. Names. Not finances. Names. Daniel Reeves. Son needs medicine before frost. Aaron Bell. Leg wound. Silver thread bandages urgent. Mara Tilden. Husband's death letter rewritten. Original too cold. Samuel Reed. Mother's credit approved. Sister's winter cough. Julian turned the page. More names. More needs. More silent work. Some notes were practical. Some were painfully tender. Tell Mrs. Bell her son asked for apple bread when fever broke. She will need that detail. Do not let Elder Voss remove widow grain credit. He will call it temporary. His Majesty's hand stiffens after long signing. Move border decrees earlier. Sleep tea balance unchanged unless nightmares return. Julian stared at that line. Sleep tea. He turned pages faster. There was no recipe. Only evidence that there had been one. A knowledge she had carried and not left behind. His anger tried to rise. It failed. There was no place for anger to stand in this room. Not against her. Not against absence arranged with such precision. Celeste stood at the doorway now, pale and silent. Her gaze moved from the ring to the keys to the ledger. For the first time since arriving at Ashford, she looked less like a future Luna than a woman who had walked into a room and found the cost of being welcomed. Voss whispered, She cannot have gone far. Julian looked up. The sentence struck the wrong place. She cannot. The elder stiffened. Julian turned slowly. Why? Voss faltered. I only mean, because she is soft? Julian asked. Because she is loyal? Because women who understand their place do not leave it before dawn. No one spoke. The words had come from the room last night. From men like Voss. From him. Mostly from him. Marcus picked up one of the sealed letters. Condolence letters, he said quietly. For the Western families. Julian looked at him. Marcus's jaw was tight. She finished them before leaving. That did it. Not the ring. Not the keys. Not the empty room. The letters. The fact that after hearing she meant nothing, Emma had still given grief gentler language before walking away. Julian sat down on the edge of her bed because his legs no longer trusted the rest of him. The bed was made. Cold. Of course it was. Emma had not slept in it. He saw her suddenly in unbearable detail. Soft white, face tired from the dinner. Round cheeks pale in candlelight. Eyes lowered when they laughed. hands steady enough to slide the healer report beneath the council door after his words had found her. No tears for him. No confrontation. No plea. Just final service. Then absence. Julian pressed his fingers against his brow. She heard me, he said. No one answered. I said it, and she heard me. Still no answer. There were answers silence gave better than speech. Celeste stepped forward slowly. Your Majesty, he looked at her. She stopped under the force of it. Not anger at her exactly, but truth had sharpened him, and she stood too close to the blade. I did not know, she said. Marcus's eyes moved to her. Celeste swallowed. I knew the council preferred me. I knew they wanted a presentation. I did not know her gaze fell to the ledger. I did not know she was this much. Julian laughed once. No humor in it. This much. The phrase was too small. Everything in the room was too small. The ring was too small for what it had promised. The keys too small for the doors she opened. The ledger too small for the kingdom she had quietly held together. Even regret felt too small, arriving this late, and still expecting to be called noble. A guard appeared breathless at the doorway. Your Majesty. Julian stood. What? Samuel Reed at the healer gate reports Miss Whitmore left before dawn. The room did not move. Julian's voice lowered. Alone? Yes, Your Majesty. Direction? East Road. How long ago? Before first bell. East Road. He knew that road. He had ridden it for patrols, treaties, punishments, hunts. Never once had it looked like a way Emma might leave him. He moved toward the door. Marcus stepped into his path. Julian. This time, no title. Move. No, the room went still. Julian's wolf rose. Marcus did not lower his head. She left because of what she heard. If you chase her like a king retrieving property, you will prove every reason she walked out. The words hit hard enough to stop him. For one violent second, Julian wanted to command, to roar, to make the world simple through power. Then his gaze moved past Marcus to the desk. The keys, the ring, the ledger, the empty place where Emma's handwriting would never appear again unless she chose it. Property did not leave condolence letters. Property did not keep kings human. Property did not stand outside doors and decide not to beg. Julian breathed once. Badly. What did she say at the gate? The guard shifted. Samuel said she told him. The king no longer requires me. Julian closed his eyes. There it was. His words returned through her mouth, cleaned of anger, made into fact. The king no longer requires me. She had not said want. Not love. Requires. Because that was the only language he had ever given her permission to believe. He opened his eyes. And then, the guard looked miserable. He asked where she would go. Julian waited. He said she answered, somewhere I am not nothing. Celeste covered her mouth. Voss lowered his eyes. Marcus turned away. Julian stood in Emma Whitmore's small, clean room while morning fully entered the palace. Somewhere east, she was walking with a plain cloak, a small satchel, and no farewell letter. Somewhere behind him, the court would soon begin correcting itself around her absence and failing. Somewhere inside him, a truth he had refused for years opened its eyes. He had not lost a convenience. He had not lost a helper. He had not lost a woman who imagined more than he promised. He had lost the person who knew how to keep him from becoming worse. And he had called her nothing because honoring what she was would have required him to become worthy of it. Julian looked at the Luna ring one last time. Then at the east-facing window. The dawn outside was pale and merciless. Find out where the east road branches, he said. Marcus's expression tightened. Julian. I said find out. I did not say bring her back. That distinction hurt to speak. It was also the first decent thing he had managed all morning. Marcus studied him, then nodded once. Julian remained in the room after they left. He picked up the polished cloak clasp and held it in his palm. Silver Wolf's head, bright as if she had prepared him for counsel one final time. His hand closed around it. For years, Emma had stood behind him so quietly that he mistook her silence for permanence. Now Ashford Palace had an empty room, cold tea, unfinished margins, and a king who finally understood the difference between being needed and being loved. He had needed her. She had loved him. And by morning, the woman he called nothing was gone. The East Road did not comfort Emma Whitmore. That was why she trusted it. Comfort would have been suspicious after Ashford. Comfort would have asked her to soften too quickly, to call the cold air freedom before her lungs had learned how to breathe without duty in them. The road gave her no such mercy. It was damp, uneven, edged with dark pines and late frost. It made her feet ache. It made the hem of her traveling cloak heavy with mud. It did not pretend leaving was painless. Good. Emma could respect honesty, even when it hurt. By sunrise, the palace had vanished behind the lower hills. She stopped once on a ridge and looked back. Not long. Only enough to see the black towers of Ashford Palace standing against the pale sky like a memory that still believed itself important. For 5 years, every morning had begun inside those walls. Bitterleaf steam. Council notes. Julian's cloak clasp. The quiet fear that if she failed one small task, a king, a soldier, a widow, a child, or an entire treaty might suffer for it. Now there was only road. No one had called for her. No one had asked where the fever cloth was. No one had told her Lord Keene would be insulted if not answered before noon. No one needed tea. The emptiness should have felt peaceful. Instead, it felt enormous. Emma kept walking. Her satchel bumped softly against her side. It held almost nothing. A change of dress. A few coins. A comb. The healer's knife. No ring. No keys. No ledger. She had left behind proof. She carried only herself. That should have been enough. Somewhere after mid-morning, the bond of habit pulled at her harder than grief. Not a true mate bond. Julian had never given her even that sacred certainty. This was worse in its own way. A bond built from repeated service. 1,000 mornings. 1,000 small predictions. 1,000 times choosing his need before her wound had finished bleeding. Her mind moved toward him without permission. He would hate the kitchen tea. He would open the Lord Keene note and find it unfinished. He would read the healer report too late unless Marcus pressed him. His right hand would stiffen by afternoon. Emma stopped walking, closed her eyes. The forest around her was quiet except for the drip of water from pine needles. No, she whispered. The words sounded small. She said it again. No. Care was not a chain unless she let it become one. She had finished the condolence letters. She had marked the healer report urgent. She had given Samuel Reed the information about his mother's medicine credit. She had not abandoned the helpless. She had abandoned the man who had mistaken her care for his right. There was a difference. She had to learn it before guilt found her and dressed itself as love. By noon, rain began. Thin at first, then steady. Emma pulled her hood lower and followed the east road toward the healer village at Briar Glen. She knew the place from supply ledgers, not from memory. A small settlement beyond Ashford's direct court roads. Too poor to impress nobles. Too useful to survive without being counted by women like her. Women like her. The phrase settled oddly. Perhaps there were others. Women who kept records men took credit for. Women who softened letters. Women who knew which child needed medicine and which warrior lied about pain. Women who were called kind until kindness became a position no one paid, honored, or protected. At the next bend, a cart stood half-sunk in mud. An old man struggled beside it. One was trapped deep near the ditch. A girl of 12 held the reins of a tired mule, her face tight with worry. Emma slowed. She should keep going. She was cold. Her shoes were soaked. Her chest ached with exhaustion. But the old man's hands shook too badly to free the wheel, and the girl was trying not to cry. Emma sighed softly. Some instincts were not cages. Some were character. She walked toward them. Do you have rope? The old man startled, then looked at her hood, her muddy hem, her soft pale face. No, miss. Not enough. Emma set down her satchel. Then unload the back first. Wade is holding the wheel down. The girl blinked. You know carts. I know mistakes people make when they are tired. That was not an answer. It was enough. Together, they moved 2 sacks of grain and a crate of medicine jars onto the roadside. Emma used a fallen branch beneath the wheel for leverage while the old man pushed and the girl coaxed the mule forward. The cart lurched free. Mud splashed Emma's dress. The girl gasped. I am sorry. Emma looked down. The stain spread across the brown fabric. For one absurd second, she remembered Celeste's silver gown. Untouched. Moonlit. Worthy of chandeliers. Then Emma looked at the freed cart. At least this mud is honest, she said. The girl laughed. A small sound. Bright against the rain. The old man bowed his head. You saved us half a day, miss. Briar Glen would have been waiting for these. Emma's gaze moved to the medicine crate. What medicines? Fever tincture. Lung salve. Bandages. Her body remembered Samuel's sister. Daniel Reeves's son. Aaron Bell. All the names that never left easily. Briar Glen has winter cough already. The old man's eyebrows rose. You know of it. I know of most things people ignore until they become expensive. He looked at her more carefully then. Are you a healer? Emma almost said no, then paused. What was she? Not Luna. Not advisor. Not the king's useful girl. I know enough to help records reach medicine before funerals do, she said. The old man nodded as if that made sense to him in a way court never had. My daughter runs the clinic. We can give you tea if you are headed that way. Emma's stomach tightened at the word tea. Not because of the drink. Because of the room. The blue flame. The cup. The man who would wake tomorrow and perhaps finally taste absence. I am headed that way, she said. They rode the last mile to Briar Glen together. Emma sat in the back of the cart beside the medicine crate, rain on her cloak, mud drying at her hem. The girl, whose name was Hannah, asked no questions after the first few. Children often understood silence better than adults because they had not yet learned to fear it. Briar Glen appeared slowly through the rain. Low roofs. Smoke. A narrow bridge. No banners. No black marble. No silver wolves watching from stone. The clinic was a whitewashed house with a green door and windows fogged by warmth. Inside, the air smelled of boiled herbs, wet wool, and sickness. Emma stepped in and stopped. Not because it was beautiful, because no one expected her to disappear. A woman with gray-brown hair came from the back room, wiping her hands on an apron. Father, you are late. Rode took the wheel. The woman's eyes moved to Emma. And who is this? Emma felt the old reflex. Explain herself through usefulness. I helped. I know ledgers. I belong to no. She removed her hood. Rain had dampened her hair against her cheeks. Her round face was pale from cold. Her eyes were tired. Emma Whitmore, she said. Just that. The woman studied her, then nodded. Nora Bell. Clinic keeper. Bell. Emma looked toward the medicine shelves. Aaron Bell. Nora's face changed. My brother. He is alive, Emma said quickly. His fever broke. His leg needs silver thread bandages for another week. Nora grabbed the edge of the table. No one had told her yet. Of course they had not. Official messages moved slowly when no one like Emma carried grief faster than protocol. He is alive? Nora whispered. Yes. The old man crossed himself under his breath. Hannah began to cry quietly. Emma stood in the doorway, cold and muddy, feeling something inside her twist. Not from pain this time. From proof. She had walked away from Ashford, and still the work of care followed her. But here, when Nora Bell gripped her hand and said, Thank you, she looked directly at Emma's face. Not past her. Not through her. At her. It was such a small difference that Emma nearly had to sit down. Nora did not ask why she was traveling alone until after she made her tea. Not bitter leaf. Not moonroot. Not anything measured to keep a king human. Just mint, honey, and heat. Emma held the cup in both hands. For once, the tea had been made for her. That was when exhaustion reached her. Not dramatically. No collapse. No sobbing fit. Only her shoulders lowering as if they had forgotten they were allowed. Nora sat across from her. There is a spare room above the clinic, she said. If you need a night. Emma looked at the window. Rain blurred the road outside. By now, Ashford Palace would know. Julian would have stood in her room. Seen the ring. The keys. The ledger. He would know she heard. Part of her wanted that knowledge to hurt him. Another part was too tired to care whether it did. I can pay, Emma said. Nora waved one hand. You helped my father and brought word of my brother. That pays for tonight. Emma almost refused, then stopped. Pride had kept her dignified, but dignity did not require rejecting every kindness before it touched her. Thank you, she said. The words felt unfamiliar when not attached to service. That evening, Emma helped Nora sort the medicine crate. Not because she owed it, because she wanted her hands to remember work that did not belong to Julian. Fever tinctures by shelf, bandages by width, lung salves near the warming stones. Nora watched her for a while. You have done this before. Yes. Where? Emma placed 3 jars in a row. Ashford Palace. Silence. Not fearful. Careful. Nora's voice softened. Are you running from danger? Emma thought of Julian's voice behind the door. She means nothing to me. Danger did not always wear a blade. Sometimes it wore certainty that you would endure anything because you always had. No, Emma said. I am walking away from being diminished. Nora nodded once, as if that answer needed no translation. After supper, Hannah showed Emma the small room above the clinic. A narrow bed, a chest, A slanted roof. A window overlooking the bridge. No silver banners. No closed Luna chamber. No study door glowing with a king she should not enter. Emma set her satchel on the bed and stood very still. The room was plain, temporary, her own for one night. Outside, rain softened over Briar Glen. Below, Nora moved through the clinic, humming quietly as she checked patients. Emma removed her cloak and hung it by the window. Mud stained the hem. She did not try to clean it yet. Let the road remain visible. Let leaving leave evidence. She sat on the bed and took off her shoes. Her feet ached. Her heart ached worse. Neither ache commanded her to return. That was new. On the small table beside the bed, Hannah had left a folded cloth, a candle, and a cup of water. Beneath them sat a scrap of paper with childish handwriting. "Thank you for helping us." Emma touched the note. For words. No title. No use. No expectation. Just thanks attached to something she had chosen freely. She placed it beside the candle, then lay down without undressing fully. Sleep did not come at once. It came slowly, after memories tried and failed to become orders. Julian's cup. Julian's hand. Julian's study. Julian's voice. Nothing. Emma opened her eyes in the dark. "No," she whispered one more time. Not to him. To the part of herself still trained to answer. Below the window, the road divided beyond the bridge. One path curved west toward Ashford. One path continued east through Pine and Rain. Emma closed her eyes. For the first time since she left the palace, she did not think of where Julian would search. She thought of where she might go next. And in that small, quiet shift, the woman he had called nothing began to become someone even she had not met yet. By the second morning after Emma Whitmore left, Ashford Palace began making mistakes out loud. The first was the tea. Julian Blackthorne did not sleep. Not truly. He sat in his private chamber until dawn, one hand wrapped around the polished wolf-head cloak clasp Emma had left on her desk, while the palace healers tried 3 different remedies and failed with all of them. Lavender made his wolf restless. Honeyroot dulled his mind but sharpened the nightmares. Bitterleaf alone tasted close enough to memory to make him furious, then sick with the reason why. At sunrise, he threw none of the cups. That restraint frightened the servants more than anger would have. They had seen anger before. This silence was new. He entered council with red-rimmed eyes and no margin notes. That was the second mistake. Lord Keene's correspondence had not been corrected. The reply drafted by the clerk sounded cold, too formal, almost insulting. Julian signed it before Marcus Hale could stop him because Emma had always placed dangerous documents on the left side of his desk, never the right. No one knew that. Not until the northern envoy read the reply and left the palace before luncheon with his mouth tight and his pride injured. The third mistake arrived from the healer wing. Aaron Bell's silver thread bandages had not been delivered. The supply order had been marked urgent, but not transferred to the proper ledger because Emma had slid the report under the council door, and no one had known which clerk usually completed the second step. By noon, Nora Bell sent a message from Briar Glen. Polite, brief, devastating. My brother's wound reopened because the bandages were delayed. Send what Miss Whitmore marked before more men suffer from royal neatness. Julian read the note twice. Miss Whitmore. Not Emma. Not your attendant. Not the useful woman. Miss Whitmore. Respect had traveled east faster than his regret. Celeste Monroe stood across the council table when the message arrived. She wore no silver that day. Only a dark blue gown and a face that had not slept much either. That is the clinic where she went. Celeste asked. Julian looked up sharply. Marcus answered before he could. We believe she passed through Briar Glen. Celeste's gaze moved to the note. She helped them. Marcus's voice was quiet. She always helps. The sentence landed without accusation. That made it worse. Julian set the note down. Send the bandages. Double the order. Marcus nodded. And the letter? What letter? To Nora Bell, Marcus said. Someone should answer. Julian's first instinct was to say he had no time. The words rose, then died. No time had been the excuse that allowed Emma to become the person who carried every human thing he did not want to touch. He reached for paper. His hand hovered. He did not know how to write to a woman whose brother's wound had reopened because his palace did not know how to function without the woman he had called nothing. Celeste spoke softly. May I? Julian looked at her. She did not look proud. She looked ashamed. I will draft it, she said. Not as Luna. Not with court phrases. He almost refused, then remembered Emma's ledger. Mara Tilden, original too cold. He pushed the paper toward Celeste. She sat, for several minutes. Only the scratch of her pen filled the room. The council watched her differently now, not admiring, measuring. Perhaps that was fair. Perhaps being chosen should come with the weight of proving she understood what had been taken to give her place. When Celeste finished, she slid the page to Julian. Norabel, your message was received. The delay was Ashford's failure, not your brother's misfortune. Silver thread bandages and additional supplies are being sent immediately. Miss Whitmore's original urgency mark should have been honored. It will be now. Julian read the words, then signed them. His name beneath an admission. Small. Late. Necessary. The council remained quiet. Elder Voss looked displeased, but he had learned not to speak quickly in rooms where Emma's absence sat larger than any living advisor. By evening, the palace had failed in 7 more ways. A widow came for grain credit and was told to return after Frost Moon review because no one found Emma's red mark under the Eastern ledger. Marcus found it himself 20 minutes later and carried the corrected order to the woman in the courtyard. The cloak clasp for Julian's formal coat had not been polished. A servant offered another. Julian stared at the dull silver and saw Emma's hands. Soft hands. Harmless hands. Hands that had kept metal bright, records gentle, and grief from hardening before it reached his people. He did not wear the coat. The kitchen sent the wrong dinner to the visiting envoy because Emma had always marked dietary restrictions with blue thread. No one knew where she kept the thread. The Frost Moon presentation schedule collapsed when Celeste quietly refused the silver gown prepared for her. That failure happened in the Luna chamber. Julian found her there near midnight, standing before the open wardrobe while 3 maids waited in anxious silence. The gown hung like moonlight over a chair. Pearls spilled beside it. The room smelled of roses and old expectation. Celeste's face was pale. I cannot wear it, she said. The maids looked at Julian in fear. He dismissed them. When the door closed, Celeste touched the silver sleeve with 2 fingers. This room was opened for me before anyone closed the wound they made in her. Julian said nothing. He had no defense left that did not sound like a smaller man speaking from inside a crown. Celeste turned toward him. Did she know? Yes. How much? She heard me. Celeste closed her eyes. The answer had already been known. Hearing it still hurt. I wanted to be chosen, she whispered. That is the ugliest truth. I told myself I was not taking anything because you had never named her. But everyone knew there was something unnamed. We all walked around it like furniture. Julian looked at the silver gown. The Luna chamber had never seemed beautiful to him. Not really. It had seemed necessary. A room waiting for the right public shape. Now it looked like a polished trap. Celeste asked, did you love her? The question did not come like jealousy. It came like judgment. Julian looked toward the window. Outside, Ashford's black courtyard lay under early frost. I needed her, he said. Celeste's expression tightened. That is not what I asked. He knew. That was why the question hurt. Love should have been immediate. Clear. Defensible. Instead, his answer had to pass through years of selfishness before reaching truth. I think I loved what she gave me, he said, and refused to look at what it cost her. Celeste looked away. That may be worse. Yes. The word came without pride. At last, she removed the pearl necklace from the chair and placed it back in its case. I will not be presented at Frost Moon. Julian turned. The council will object. They can. They chose you for that. No, Celeste said, quiet but firm. They chose the idea of me. They do not know whether I can be Luna. Neither do I. The old Julian would have corrected her, directed her, protected the plan because the plan kept the court stable. But Emma's empty room had made certain types of stability look like rot. What do you want? He asked. Celeste stared at him. The question seemed to strike her almost as hard as Emma's absence had struck him. I do not know, she said. He nodded once. Then the presentation waits. Celeste's eyes filled, but she did not cry. Perhaps the whole palace was learning Emma's language too late. Silence. Restraint. Truth without performance. The next day, news reached Ashford from Briar Glen. Emma had left before dawn again. Not back toward the palace. Farther east. Norabel's message included no destination. Only one line. She said to tell Samuel Reed his sister's cough needs steam, not syrup, and that the Eastern ledger still carries the approved credit. Julian sat with that line for a long time. Even gone, Emma remembered. Not him first. The people. That was the difference he had been too arrogant to understand. Her loyalty had not been weakness. Her care had not been attachment he could exploit forever. It had been character. And character, once disrespected, did not become less valuable because it walked away. At council that afternoon, Julian placed Emma's black ledger on the table. The room went still. Elder Voss looked sharply at it. Your Majesty? We will begin here, Julian said. With Miss Whitmore's personal notes. With the names this council allowed to become her private burden. No one spoke. He opened to the first page. Daniel Reeves. His son needs medicine before frost. Why was this not in the central ledger? A clerk stammered. Miss Whitmore usually transferred. Why was it hers to transfer? Silence. He turned the page. Mara Tilden. Her husband's death letter was rewritten because the original was too cold. Who wrote the original? Another silence. Julian looked around the table. For years, this council had hidden behind Emma's competence and called her softness lesser. Now the room looked older under morning light. Smaller. He read name after name. Not quickly, not ceremonially. As punishment. As record. As the beginning of a kingdom, learning what a woman had carried while they laughed softly about her place. When he reached the note about his hands stiffening after long signing, he stopped. His voice failed. No one rescued him from it. Good. He did not deserve rescue. Marcus stood near the wall, eyes lowered. Celeste sat at the far end of the table, not in the Luna chair. She had requested a working seat. The council disliked it. She had not changed her mind. Julian turned another page. Sleep tea balance unchanged unless nightmares return. His fingers tightened on the ledger. They have returned, Elder Voss said carefully. Julian looked at him. The elder seemed to realize too late that concern could sound like accusation when aimed at the wrong wound. Julian closed the ledger. Then perhaps I should have honored the woman who knew how to quiet them. No one answered. There was nothing useful to say. Useful. He hated the word now. Not because it was false. Because he had made it small. Emma had been useful the way a bridge was useful. The way medicine was useful. The way memory, mercy, and truth were useful. Necessary things became invisible only to the spoiled. That evening, Julian went alone to the private kitchen. The room was dark, the blue flame unlit. The black clay pot rested empty in the sink. He stood there for a long time. Then he opened the herb cabinet. Bitter leaf, moonroot, silver mint. He recognized the jars. Not the amounts. Never the amounts. He took them down one by one, placed them on the table, and stared at them like a language he had expected to understand because someone else had spent years translating it for him. He brewed the tea himself. Badly. Too much bitter leaf. Not enough moonroot. The smell was wrong. The taste was worse. He drank it anyway. Every swallow was punishment. Every swallow was memory. Emma walking the corridor before dawn. Emma marking red lines. Emma lowering her eyes at dinner. Emma sliding the healer report beneath the door after he called her nothing. Emma leaving him the cleanest room in Ashford. At midnight, he wrote a letter. Not to summon. Not to command. Not even to apologize the way men apologize when they still expect their pain to become someone else's responsibility. He wrote one sentence first. Miss Whitmore, Ashford has begun correcting the systems you carried alone. Then he stopped. It was not enough. Nothing was. He folded the blank page and left it unsent. For once, he did not use Emma as the place where his unfinished emotion could be placed. Outside, Ashford Palace continued to stumble. Inside, the king sat beside a cup of terrible tea and understood the shape of his first real lesson. She had not left chaos behind. She had left truth. And truth, once unattended by the woman who used to soften it, had finally begun speaking in every room. By the 7th day after Emma Whitmore vanished, Ashford Palace had learned to lower its voice when saying her name. Not because Julian ordered it, because guilt had entered the walls. It lived in the council chamber where her ledger now sat open during every morning meeting. It lived in the private kitchen where the black clay pot remained in the sink like a small grave. It lived in the Luna chamber where Celeste Monroe had covered the silver gown with a plain cloth and refused to let anyone polish the pearls. It lived most deeply in Julian Blackthorne. He had not slept properly since she left. The healers whispered about imbalance. The elders whispered about instability. The servants whispered nothing when he passed, which was worse. Silence had become Emma's language in the palace. Everywhere he went, it answered him. That morning, Marcus Hale entered the council room with road reports from the eastern villages. Julian looked up too quickly. Marcus saw it. Everyone saw it. No one named it. What news? Julian asked. Marcus placed 3 sealed notices on the table. Briar Glen confirms Miss Whitmore left 2 days ago. She stayed 1 night, helped free a medicine cart, sorted clinic supplies, and carried word of Aaron Bell's recovery to his sister. Celeste looked down at her hands. Julian's throat tightened. Even in departure, Emma had done what Ashford failed to do. She had reached people before the Crown did. Where did she go after Briar Glen? He asked. East, Marcus said. Julian waited. Marcus did not soften the answer. Toward the neutral border road. The room changed. Elder Voss stiffened. The neutral road is dangerous for a woman traveling alone. Julian's eyes lifted slowly. A woman this council called harmless kept half this kingdom functioning while armed men argued over seating charts. Be careful what you call dangerous. Voss lowered his gaze. It was not enough. Nothing he said in her defense now could travel backward and stand beside her at dinner. Still, the room heard it. Late justice was not justice. But cowardice repeated after regret would be another sin. Julian turned to Marcus. Send riders. Marcus's jaw tightened. Julian heard the protest before it came. Not to retrieve her, Julian said. The words tasted like iron. To watch the roads from a distance. If she needs help, offer it. If she refuses, they withdraw. No command. No royal seal unless she asks. Marcus studied him for a long moment. Then nodded. Yes, Your Majesty. Celeste spoke from the far end of the table. I want to send supplies to Briar Glen in her name. Every elder turned toward her. Celeste did not shrink. Not as charity from Ashford Palace, she said. As correction. The clinic should not have had to wait for a vanished woman to make us remember bandages. Julian looked at her. The woman he had nearly placed beside him as a silver answer now sat in a plain dark dress, hands ink-stained from reviewing ledger copies Emma left behind. She looked less dazzling, more real. Do it, he said. Elder Voss cleared his throat. The public may misunderstand. Let them understand, Julian interrupted. The elder went silent. Public image had built the room where Emma was wounded. He was done decorating rot. After council, Julian went to Emma's room. He did that now. Not every day. He told himself that mattered. It did not. Her room remained as she left it except for the ledger, which he borrowed with reverence he had never shown when her hands were near enough to thank. The Luna ring still sat open in the velvet box. The keys had been moved only once, when a servant dusted around them with trembling care. The spare cloak clasp remained on the desk when Julian was not carrying it like penance. He stood by the window facing east. Morning light fell across the narrow bed. Cold. Maid. Untouched. She will not come back because we are sorry, Marcus said from the doorway. Julian did not turn. I know. Do you? The question should have angered him. It only hurt. Julian looked at the ring. I keep thinking if I find the right words, I can at least make her understand. Marcus stepped inside. She understood before you did. Silence. Clean. Brutal. True. Julian closed his eyes. Behind them, he saw the council door again. The yellow line of light. The healer report sliding under. The last service of a woman who had just heard herself erased. She did not leave because she misunderstood me, Julian said. No, she left because she understood exactly. Yes. That was the sharpest part. Not that he had been misjudged. That he had been seen clearly. And she had chosen accordingly. A knock came at the outer door. Samuel Reed stood there, cap in hand, face pale but determined. Julian turned. The young guard swallowed. Your Majesty, you guarded the healer gate. Yes. Samuel looked like he expected punishment. Julian deserved that expectation. What did she look like when she left? Julian asked. Marcus's expression tightened, but he did not stop him. Samuel's eyes flicked to the desk, to the ring, then back. Tired, he said. Calm. Like she had already cried somewhere no one saw. Or maybe like she would not cry until she was too far for anyone to use it. Julian absorbed it. Badly. Did she seem afraid? Samuel thought carefully. No, not of the road. Of the palace, then. Or of what staying would turn her into. Julian nodded once. You opened the gate. Samuel went rigid. Yes, Your Majesty. Good. The boy blinked. Julian's voice lowered. If anyone questions you, tell them I said you did the only honorable thing done in Ashford that morning. Samuel's face changed. Relief first. Then grief. She told me my mother's medicine credit was approved. Julian looked down. Of course she did. She remembered my sister's cough too. Of course she did. Emma had remembered everyone except herself until the last hour. Julian dismissed him gently. When Samuel left, the room seemed smaller. Marcus looked toward the desk. What now? Julian had ruled wars, treaties, rebellions, famine negotiations, border disputes, and blood feuds. He had always known the next order. Now he knew none. Now, he said slowly, we make the kingdom function without stealing a woman's life to do it. Marcus nodded. And Emma? Julian looked east. If she wants nothing from me, that is the first wish of hers I will honor correctly. The words nearly broke him. They did not. He had no right to the relief of breaking. That evening, the Frost Moon presentation was cancelled. Not postponed. Cancelled. Celeste made the announcement herself in the lower hall, standing where chandeliers once waited to make her look like destiny. I will not be presented as Luna under circumstances built from another woman's humiliation, she said. The court froze. Lady Marin looked scandalized. Elder Voss looked old. Celeste continued, voice steady. Emma Whitmore was not nothing. Any future arrangement made in this palace will begin with that truth, or not begin at all. Whispers moved like wind through silver banners. Julian stood beside the western arch and let them. He did not rescue Celeste from discomfort. She had chosen speech. It belonged to her. Afterward, Lady Marin approached him. Your Majesty, surely this is excessive. Miss Whitmore was valuable, yes, but Julian turned his head. Lady Marin stopped. But, he asked. Her mouth closed. Finish the sentence. She did not. Good. Some silences could be taught. The next day, Ashford began changing. Not beautifully. Not all at once. Systems built on invisible women do not reform because one guilty king finally reads a ledger. Clerks resisted. Elders complained. Nobles called it unnecessary complication. Julian signed orders anyway. Widow letters would be reviewed by a grief office. Not a single woman after midnight. Healer reports would trigger automatic supply release before council approval. Servant medicine credits would be entered into central records. No private aid would carry royal emergency systems without title, pay, and authority. At the bottom of the decree, Julian added a line over Voss's objection. This reform is entered in acknowledgement of Emma Whitmore's uncredited service to Ashford. The court hated that line. Julian kept it. By then, Emma was no longer on the East Road. At least not according to the riders who returned at dusk. Marcus brought the report himself. Julian was in the private kitchen, failing again at the tea. He had burned the moon root. The room smelled bitter enough to punish the stone. Marcus paused in the doorway. You will poison yourself. I have survived worse. Not by your own skill. That landed. Julian poured the ruined tea out. What did the riders find? Marcus removed his gloves. She crossed the neutral border yesterday morning. Julian stilled. Alone? No. With a merchant caravan heading toward Greyhaven. Greyhaven, a neutral city, large enough to disappear, old enough to protect its own laws. Julian gripped the edge of the table. Did she know Ashford riders were near? Yes. The answer entered him slowly. Marcus continued. She saw them at the ridge. One approached under your instruction. He offered assistance. She refused. Julian closed his eyes. What did she say? Marcus hesitated. Julian opened his eyes. What did she say? She said, Tell Alpha King Julian Blackthorn I am not lost. The room went silent. The blue flame flickered beneath the empty pot. I am not lost. Not I hate him. Not do not follow. Not a plea. A correction. Because of course he would frame her absence as something to solve. A woman leaves a palace, and kings call it lost when they mean uncontrolled. Julian lowered his head. A sound almost came from him. Not quite. Marcus stayed. Loyal enough not to leave him alone with the first clean pain of understanding. She also said, Marcus added, that Briar Glen should receive the supplies before Ashford sends any apology. Julian's mouth moved. Not a smile. Something broken near one. Of course she did. They stood in the abandoned kitchen where Emma had once kept him human. Finally, Julian said, Send the supplies. Already done. Good. Marcus waited. And the apology? Julian looked at the burned herbs. No, Marcus's eyebrows lifted slightly. No. She refused assistance. She corrected the terms. She prioritized the clinic. Julian breathed once. If I send apology now, It will be for my pain, not her need. Marcus watched him carefully. For the first time, approval touched his face. Small, reluctant, earned by almost nothing. But there. Julian turned off the blue flame. The kitchen darkened. In Greyhaven, Emma might be finding a room, a clinic, a ledger that did not belong to him. A life where her first morning task was not keeping an undeserving king from his own nightmares. The thought hurt. It also steadied him. Because if regret truly loved her at all, it had to want her free more than it wanted her near. Weeks passed. Ashford changed in uneven motions. Celeste worked beside the grief office until her handwriting lost its decorative elegance and gained practical clarity. Samuel's mother received medicine before Frost. Aaron Bell's wound healed. Lord Keene received a proper apology and accepted it with the offended dignity of a man pleased to be offended correctly. Julian still slept badly. He learned the tea poorly. Then adequately. Never the same. That seemed right. Some comforts should not be replaceable. On the first snow of winter, a letter arrived from Greyhaven. Not for Julian. For the Ashford healer wing. The handwriting was Emma's. Marcus brought it to council and read it aloud because Julian could not trust his hands. The letter contained no personal greeting. It listed a revised method for tracking fever cloth, based on Greyhaven clinic practice. It noted that Ashford's Eastern ledgers were still vulnerable to duplicate entries. It included a correction for Samuel Reed's sister, who needed steam treatment twice daily during cold months. At the bottom, in Emma's clean hand, was one sentence. Care does not require my return. Julian heard it as if she had spoken from the doorway. Care does not require my return. The council sat silent. Celeste closed her eyes. Marcus lowered the page. Julian looked at the empty chair beside the record table. Not the Luna chair. He had ordered that removed. This was a working chair. Plain. Unadorned. One Emma should have had years ago. She is right, Julian said. No one argued. Outside, snow began to cover the courtyard. Inside, Ashford Palace finally stopped waiting for Emma Whitmore to return and began learning how to honor what she had left. Not because honor could bring her back. Because it could not. That was the lesson. Some women vanish before morning and leave no body to rescue. No dramatic curse to break. No final test of love to pass. Only a room too clean to misunderstand. A ledger too honest to dismiss. A sentence too clear to soften. She means nothing to me. And then, later, from the woman who survived it, I am not lost. Julian sat through the rest of council with Emma's letter on the table and understood that his regret had finally reached the place where love should have begun. Respect without access. Care without claim. Truth without reward. Far east, beyond neutral roads and winter bridges, Emma Whitmore was not waiting to be found. She was becoming difficult to diminish. And for the first time, the king who had called her nothing did not send riders after her. He sent supplies where she had asked. Then he stayed behind with the kingdom she had forced him to grow worthy of, knowing that by morning she had been gone from his palace for weeks. But only now had he truly begun to let her leave. Greyhaven did not ask Emma Whitmore who she had been before it gave her work. That was the first reason she stayed. The city was older than Ashford and less impressed by kings. Its streets curved around stone clinics, merchant courts, bakeries, herb shops, and narrow bridges that crossed canals dark with winter rain. No one bowed when a noble carriage passed unless they were paid to unload it. No palace banners claimed the sky. No silver wolves watched women from carved walls. Greyhaven cared about documents, debt, medicine, trade, and whether a person knew how to be useful without making usefulness into ownership. Emma found a room above a widowed apothecary shop on Lantern Street. The widow's name was Ruth Calder. She was 60, sharp-tongued, and refused to let Emma pay 2 months in advance because, as she said, only people running from pride try to purchase peace in bulk. Emma had almost smiled. Almost. Her room was small, with a slanted ceiling and one window facing the canal. At dawn, mist rose from the water and silvered the rooftops. The bed creaked. The basin leaked. The floorboard near the door complained every time she stepped on it. It was imperfect. It was hers. On the 3rd day, Ruth found Emma reorganizing the apothecary shelves by illness pattern instead of herb alphabet. "Are you correcting my shop?" Ruth asked from the doorway. Emma froze with a jar of lung salve in her hand. Old instinct rose first. "Apologize." Lower her voice. Make herself harmless. Then she looked at Ruth's face and saw no insult there. Only curiosity sharpened by age. Yes, Emma said. Ruth's brows lifted. Bold. Your fever tinctures were 4 shelves away from the willow cloths. People who need both are usually carrying sick children. They should not have to turn in circles while afraid. Ruth stared at her, then took the jar from Emma's hand and placed it exactly where Emma had been moving it. Continue. That was the second reason Emma stayed. In Greyhaven, correction did not always become offense. Sometimes it became arrangement. Within a week, Ruth began sending her to the free clinic near the North Canal. Within 2, the clinic keeper asked whether Emma could read supply records. Within 3, Emma had found 4 duplicate entries, 2 missing payments, and 1 entire chest of winter bandages misfiled under livestock wraps. The clinic keeper, an exhausted man named Peter Alden, looked at the corrected ledger and said, "How long have you done this?" Emma held the ink rag between her fingers. Long enough. He did not ask for a better answer. Good. Some histories were not owed to people who only needed the present truth. The work was familiar. That frightened her at first. Ledgers, medicine credits, widow names, illness patterns, supply delays caused not by lack, but by men signing documents in the wrong order. For a few nights, she wondered whether she had truly left Ashford or only carried its shape into a different city. Then the difference appeared. At the Greyhaven Clinic, people thanked the clerk who found the missing bandages. They paid her. They wrote her name on records. When Peter introduced her to the supply board, he said, "This is Miss Emma Whitmore. She has corrected the Northern Fever ledger." Listen before arguing. Emma had stood beside the table, waiting for the smile. The soft one. The one that said helpful girl. It did not come. The board argued with her numbers instead. For 40 minutes. Honestly. Sharply. With irritation aimed at the system, not her body, her face, her softness, or whatever place they believed she should understand. By the end of the meeting, 3 men disliked her. 2 women respected her. 1 elderly merchant tried to hire her away before supper. Emma walked back to Lantern Street under winter rain with the strangest feeling in her chest. Not happiness. Not yet. Recognition. As if a part of herself had been standing behind a locked door for years and had finally heard footsteps coming for it. That evening, Ruth made onion soup and pretended not to notice when Emma sat too quietly at the table. "Did they insult you?" Ruth asked. "No." "Did they obey too quickly?" "No." "Then why do you look wounded?" Emma stared into the bowl. Because being heard without being pitied had hurt more than expected. Because payment felt heavier than gratitude. Because her name on a ledger looked almost indecent after years of handwriting other people's authority into order. Because no one had said she meant nothing. Because no one had said she meant everything either. They had simply treated her like a person doing work. "I am not used to being argued with properly," Emma said. Ruth nodded as if this were perfectly reasonable. Improper argument is usually just dismissal wearing shoes. Emma did smile then. Small. Tired. Real enough that it startled her. By the 5th week, Ashford became news instead of atmosphere. Merchants brought stories. The Frost Moon presentation had been cancelled. Celeste Monroe worked in a grief office. Alpha King Julian had removed the Luna chair from council. Widow protections had been sealed permanently. Healer reports now triggered automatic supply release. Emma heard these things while weighing silver mint in Ruth's shop. She did not drop the jar. That felt important. Her hands remained steady. Ruth watched from behind the counter. "You know that kingdom." Emma poured the herb carefully into a paper packet. "Yes." "Know the king?" "Yes." Ruth waited. Emma tied the packet. "He once knew me less than he thought." Ruth accepted the answer. "Good woman." The packet went to a mother whose son had winter cough. Emma added steam instructions without charging extra. "Care does not require my return." She had written that line to Ashford because it was true. Now she was learning the other half. Care did not require disappearance either. One afternoon, a courier arrived from Ashford. Not royal. Neutral. He entered Ruth's shop with snow on his shoulders and a sealed packet in his hand. "Miss Emma Whitmore." Emma was behind the counter, sorting clinic vouchers. Her body tightened. Only briefly. The scar of Ashford still lived in her muscles, but it no longer owned the room. "I am Emma Whitmore." The courier bowed. Official acknowledgement from Ashford Palace. No personal letter enclosed. Ruth went very still behind her. Emma took the packet. Plain seal. No black royal wax. No command. She opened it at the counter. Inside was a copy of the reform decree with her name written near the bottom. This reform is entered in acknowledgement of Emma Whitmore's uncredited service to Ashford. She read the sentence once. Then again. Uncredited service. Not love. Not apology. Not come back. Record. That was better. Records could not heal everything, but they made denial harder for future rooms. Beneath the decree was a second page listing Ashford payments transferred to all grief clerks, healers, and record keepers whose work had previously gone unpaid or unnamed. Emma's throat tightened, not because it fixed the past, because the past had finally been forced to testify. The courier waited. Is there a reply? Emma looked at the paper, then at Ruth's shelves, at the lung salve placed beside willow cloths, at the clinic vouchers waiting under her hand, at the city beyond the glass, where nobody knew the shape of Julian's nightmares and nobody expected Emma to measure tea before dawn. Yes, she said. She took a blank slip from Ruth's counter and wrote, Received. Emma Whitmore. Nothing more. She folded it. The courier looked almost surprised by the brevity. Emma was not. If 5 years of service had been reduced to nothing once, she would not now spend paragraphs proving she existed. Her name was enough. That night, snow fell over Greyhaven. Emma walked alone to the North Canal Bridge after the clinic closed. Lanterns glowed gold through fog. The water below moved slowly beneath crusts of ice. Somewhere nearby, a child laughed. Somewhere farther, a horse stamped against frozen stone. Life continued without asking whether she was ready for it. She rested her gloved hands on the bridge rail. For the first time, she let herself imagine Julian reading her one-word reply. Received. Would it hurt him? Probably. Would he understand? Perhaps. Would that change her path? No. That answer came gently. No. Not with hatred. Not with trembling. Not as punishment. As truth. A man could become better and still not become the place she returned to. A kingdom could correct itself and still not become home again. A wound could be acknowledged and still remain a scar. Snow gathered on her cloak. She looked down at her hands. Soft hands. Still. The court had once made that word feel like weakness. Greyhaven was teaching her that softness could hold a ledger, free a medicine cart, correct an old woman's shelves, refuse a king's unsent apology, and build a life from the first honest room offered. Behind her, footsteps approached. Emma turned. Peter Alden stood at the edge of the bridge, holding a folder against his chest. Sorry, he said. Ruth told me where to find you. The supply board approved your wage increase. Emma blinked. My what? Your wage increase. I did not ask for one. No, that was part of the problem. He held out the folder. Also, they want to create a permanent records position at the clinic. Paid. Named. With authority over emergency supply routing. Emma stared at him. The snow softened the world between them. What title? Peter glanced at the folder. Clinical Records Steward, unless you hate it. Emma almost laughed. A title. Not borrowed. Not hidden. Not given because she stood near a king. A practical title for practical work. I do not hate it, she said. Good. They want your answer by Monday. Emma took the folder. The paper felt warm despite the cold. Peter started to leave, then paused. For what it is worth, Miss Whitmore, the clinic already runs better when you are there. Old Payne rose. You are useful. Then the present corrected it. Peter had not said she belonged to him. He had not said her worth existed because he needed her. He had named improvement and placed authority beside it. Emma breathed. Thank you, she said. He nodded and left her with the snow. She opened the folder beneath a lantern. Salary. Duties. Authority. Signature line. Emma Whitmore. There it was again. Her name waiting for her, without a man's shadow falling over it. Across the city, bells rang the hour. Not palace bells. Not Ashford. Greyhaven. A city that had not saved her. A city that had simply made room and expected her to stand in it. Emma looked east, where the canal curved toward the old market. Then west, where roads eventually led back through Briar Glen, Healer Gates, black marble, and a room she had left too clean to misunderstand. She felt the ache. Of course she did. Some loves did not vanish because they were disrespected. Some loves had to be buried with both tenderness and judgment. Julian had been her great wound. He had also been the man she once stayed awake to keep human. Both truths could exist. Neither required her return. Emma folded the folder carefully and held it against her chest. Above the canal, snow settled into her hair, her shoulders, her eyelashes. She did not move at once. For 5 years, Dawn had belonged to Julian Blackthorne's survival. Now morning would come and belong to her work, her wages, her room, her locked door, her chosen city, her own name written in ink she did not have to hide. That was not a dramatic rescue. No rival king had carried her away. No crown had been placed on her head. No crowd had watched her become visible. It was quieter than that. Better, perhaps. A woman who had been called nothing stood on a neutral city bridge with a job offer in her hands and realized she did not need to become someone grand to prove the insult false. She only had to keep living where the word no longer fit. By the time Emma returned to Lantern Street, the shop windows glowed warmly through the snow. Ruth opened the door before she knocked. "Well?" the widow asked. Emma lifted the folder. "I have been offered a position." Ruth sniffed. "About time." Emma stepped inside. Warmth met her, not as command, not as duty, as welcome. She closed the door behind her and, for the first time since leaving Ashford, did not feel like a woman passing through someone else's mercy. She felt like a woman arriving, not fully healed, not finished, not untouched by the West, but real, named, paid, wanted for her mind and hands without being reduced to either. In the morning, she would write her answer. Yes, for tonight. She placed the folder on her small desk, lit a candle, and sat by the window while Greyhaven's snow covered the rooflines outside. Somewhere far behind her, an Alpha King was learning how to live with the silence she left. Emma was learning how to live with the voice she had kept. And between those two lessons, the road that once carried her away became something else. Not escape. Beginning. Emma Whitmore signed her name on Monday morning with a hand that did not tremble. That was how Greyhaven became more than a place she had escaped to. It became a place that expected her future. The clinic board met in the North Canal House, a square stone building that smelled of ink, damp wool, and boiled coffee. Peter Alden sat at one end of the table with Ruth Calder beside him. Though Ruth had no official reason to be there except that she had decided Emma should not face bureaucracy alone. No one argued with Ruth when she decided things. Emma appreciated that. The contract lay before her. Clinical records steward. Paid position. Independent authority over emergency supply routing. Access to healer logs, medicine inventory, widow credits, and winter illness reports. Her name printed clearly beneath the title. Emma Whitmore. Not attached to Ashford. Not hidden under Julian's seal. Not written in the margin beside a king's decision. Centered. The sight of it moved through her quietly. Peter slid the ink toward her. "You may request changes before signing." Emma read the document again, because old wounds had taught her that kindness should still be checked for hooks. No ownership clause. No indefinite availability. No private summons. No words like loyalty in place of wages. No expectation that gratitude would replace authority. She looked up. "I want one sentence added." The room waited. "That this position cannot be dissolved without written cause and council review." One board member frowned. "That is unusual." Emma met his eyes. So was unpaid emergency work being carried by whoever happened to notice people suffering. Ruth made a satisfied sound into her coffee. Peter did not hide his smile. The board member cleared his throat. "Fair." The sentence was added. Emma signed. The pen moved smoothly. For one heartbeat after, she simply looked at her name. Then Ruth leaned over and said, "Good. Now you can stop pretending temporary poverty is a moral virtue." Emma almost laughed. Almost was happening more often now. That afternoon, her office was assigned. Not a grand room. A narrow space behind the clinic archive with one window, 2 shelves, a desk too large for the walls, and a lock that stuck unless lifted before turning. Emma loved it immediately. She stood in the doorway while Peter placed ledgers on the shelf. "You can ask for a better desk," he said. "No, it barely fits." "Then it cannot be easily removed." He looked at her for a moment, understanding enough not to make a lesson of it. "Fair." After he left, Emma entered alone. The office smelled of dust, old paper, and possibility. She placed the contract in the top drawer. Then she took out the small note Hannah had left her in Briar Glen. "Thank you for helping us." She set it beside the inkstand. Not as decoration, as record. That was where this new life began. For several days, work filled her completely. Good work. Difficult work. Work that argued back. Greyhaven's clinic records were honest enough to be messy. Healers wrote symptoms in different orders. Merchants used old measurements for new medicines. Widow credits were scattered between temple funds and city accounts. Children with winter cough were marked under household illness instead of lung risk. Emma corrected the structure, not by softening everything, by making the truth impossible to misplace. On Thursday, a merchant named Ellis Rose slammed his palm on her desk because she denied his request to delay delivery of fever tinctures until grain payment cleared. Emma looked at his hand, then at his face. "Remove your hand from my desk." He blinked. Ruth, who had appeared silently in the doorway with a tray, smiled like a knife. Ellis removed his hand. Emma continued, "Medicine leaves today. Payment dispute goes to trade review. Sick children will not wait for your accounting pride to become generous." Ellis turned red. Peter, standing behind him, said nothing. No one rescued the man from being corrected. No one rescued Emma from the discomfort of speaking clearly. That was respect too. Later, when Ellis left with wounded dignity and signed release orders, Peter said, "You handled that well." Emma kept sorting papers. "I handled that normally." "Yes," he said. "That is what I mean." The word stayed with her. Normally. Perhaps this was what life felt like when a woman's firmness did not have to become a scandal. That evening, Emma walked home through Lantern Street with Ruth. Snow had turned to slush along the stones. The shop windows glowed amber. A baker called out that he had saved Ruth the ugly loaves she preferred. Ruth shouted back that beauty was wasted on bread. Emma laughed then. Fully. Only once. But fully. Ruth pretended not to hear. That was mercy. When they reached the apothecary, a courier waited beneath the awning. Ashford colors. Emma's laughter faded, but did not die entirely. That mattered. The courier bowed. "Miss Whitmore." Ruth stepped slightly closer. Emma did not step back. "What is it?" "A formal invitation from Ashford Palace." The street seemed to narrow. Snow dripped from the awning in slow intervals. The courier held out the sealed paper. No personal message enclosed. Issued through the Reformed Grief Office and Healer Council. Emma took it. The wax was plain. Inside, the language was careful. Ashford invited her to review the new healer routing system at the spring Inter-Kingdom Welfare Council. Not as attendant. Not as former Palisade. As clinical records steward of Greyhaven, if her city approved attendance. At the bottom was Julian's signature. Below it, Celeste Monroe's. And Marcus Hale's as witness. Emma read the document twice. Ruth watched her face. "Well," Emma folded the invitation. "They want me to attend a spring council. At Ashford? No. Neutral ground. Good. I dislike palaces on principle." Emma looked toward the west end of the street. Some roads were invisible until a letter reopened them. "I do not have to go," she said. Ruth snorted. "Of course not. That is why you should decide after supper instead of while looking tragic in public." Emma looked at her. "I do not look tragic. You look like a woman having an argument with a ghost who is losing." That time, Emma almost smiled again. Inside the shop, she placed the invitation on her desk and did not open it for the rest of the night. She made tea for herself. Mint. Honey. Nothing bitter. She drank it by the window while snow slid from the rooftops. A neutral council. Ashford present. Julian present, perhaps. The thought did not tear her open. That startled her more than pain would have. The scar remained. Of course it did. Some words cut too deeply to vanish because time behaved politely. "She means nothing to me." But the sentence no longer filled the room. It stood in a corner now. Smaller. Still ugly. Still true of him then. No longer true of her now. The next morning, Emma brought the invitation to the clinic board. "Peter, read it carefully. This is a professional request." "Yes." "Do you want to attend?" Emma looked at the ledger beside her. One was a complicated word. She did not want to see Julian. She did not want to revisit the ache in his eyes, if it had finally arrived. She did not want Ashford to become a stage where people praised her after safely surviving the consequences of ignoring her. But she did want the systems to hold. She wanted Briar Glen supplied. She wanted Aaron Bell's bandages to arrive before wounds reopened. She wanted no other woman to carry emergency governance secretly because men found visibility inconvenient. And perhaps, beneath all that, she wanted to know whether she could stand in the same room as the kingdom that diminished her and not become small. "Yes," she said. The answer surprised the room. It surprised her less. Peter nodded. As Greyhaven's clinical records steward, Emma's eyes moved to the title on her contract. "Yes. Then we will approve travel." Ruth, who had no seat and still attended, crossed her arms. I am going too. Peter looked pained. You are not part of the board. I am part of common sense. Emma did not argue. Neither did Peter. Spring arrived slowly. Greyhaven thawed first at the canals, then the market stones, then the clinic courtyard where children returned to chasing each other instead of coughing indoors. Emma's work expanded with the season. Emergency routing became permanent. Widow credit stabilized. The clinic board began arguing over future planning instead of current disaster. That was progress. Progress was less dramatic than rescue. It also lasted longer. On the morning she left for the neutral council, Emma wore a dark green traveling dress, a plain cloak, and the small silver pin Ruth gave her. Not a wolf, not a crown, a lantern. For finding things in dark rooms, Ruth had said gruffly. Emma pinned it near her collar. Her reflection in the shop mirror looked unfamiliar in the gentlest way. White American face, soft and round, pale skin warmed by spring air, eyes still tender, but no longer lowered by habit. Not queenly in the way Ashford meant. Something better. Present. The road to the neutral council passed through Briar Glen. Nora Bell came to the clinic gate with Aaron leaning on a cane beside her. His leg remained stiff, but whole. Hannah stood behind them, taller than Emma remembered. You were going west? Nora asked. Not back, Emma said. Just west. Nora smiled. Important difference. Aaron bowed his head. Miss Whitmore. The respect in his voice did not hurt this time. It steadied her. By sunset, the neutral council house came into view. Stone walls. Open courtyard. No kingdom banners inside the main chamber. Emma stepped from the carriage with Ruth at her side and Peter behind her carrying the clinic records. Across the courtyard, Ashford representatives had already arrived. Marcus saw her first. His expression changed. Relief. Respect. Grief. He bowed. Not deeply. Correctly. Miss Whitmore. Emma inclined her head. Captain Hale. Then Celeste emerged from the council entrance. No silver. No pearls. A gray dress, simple and formal, her hair pinned without decoration. She looked older than she had in Ashford. Less radiant. More awake. Their eyes met. For a moment, the past stood between them wearing candlelight. Celeste bowed her head. Not as a rival. Not as a future Luna. As a woman acknowledging another woman she had failed. Miss Whitmore, she said. Emma looked at her. Lady Monroe. Celeste flinched slightly at the distance. She accepted it. Good. Then the air changed. Emma knew before she turned. Some presences were learned too deeply to be forgotten quickly. Julian Blackthorne stood near the far arch in a black coat, without ceremony silver. He looked thinner, tired, still handsome, still powerful, but less untouched. His eyes found her and stopped. Not on her face only. On the pin at her collar. The records in Peter's arms. Ruth beside her. The space around her that did not belong to him. For 1 second, Emma remembered him standing by the study window, accepting the tea she made, calling her useful, making her feel chosen by needing her. Then she remembered the door, the sentence, the road, Greyhaven, her signature, her office, her laughter on Lantern Street. She did not break. Julian stepped forward once, then stopped himself. The movement was small. The restraint mattered. Miss Whitmore, he said. His voice was quiet. No command in it. No Emma. No claim. Emma met his gaze. Alpha King Blackthorne. The title landed between them like neutral law. Correct. Impassable. His throat moved. I am glad you arrived safely. Once, that sentence would have sounded like care. Now Emma heard what it did not contain. Come back. Why did you leave? I suffered. Good. He had learned at least where not to place his pain. Greyhaven travels well, she said. Ruth muttered. Because I packed the food. Peter coughed. Something almost gentle passed through the air. Not forgiveness. Not ease. But proof that Emma's life had witnesses now. The council bell rang. Delegates began moving inside. Julian stepped aside. Not dramatically. Just enough to clear the doorway. Emma walked past him into the chamber. No side door. No lowered gaze. No tray in her hands. She entered carrying her own records, her own title, her own city's trust. The room beyond was filled with tables arranged by delegation. Greyhaven's place stood near the center. Her nameplate waited there. Emma Whitmore, clinical records steward. She touched it once before sitting. Across the chamber, Julian watched. This time, she did not wonder whether he saw her. She knew he did. More importantly, so did everyone else. And as the spring council began, Emma opened her ledger, lifted her pen, and prepared to speak not as the woman who had vanished before morning, but as the woman who had been right to leave. The neutral council did not begin with Julian Blackthorn's regret. That was why Emma Whitmore was able to breathe. It began with grain, fever records, supply routes, bridge tolls, winter death counts corrected against spring recovery reports. Ordinary things, important things, the kind of things kings often called administration until someone they loved needed medicine and discovered administration was the shape mercy took when written properly. Emma sat at Greyhaven's table with Peter Alden on her right and Ruth Calder behind her, though Ruth still had no official role except refusing to leave rooms where foolish men might become confident. Across the chamber, Ashford's delegation sat beneath a plain black marker. No banners. Neutral law allowed no display of dominance inside the council hall. Julian wore no crown. Celeste Monroe sat beside Marcus Hale with a folder in front of her and no jewelry at her throat. Emma noticed, then returned to her ledger. That, more than anything, told her she had changed. Once, every movement from Ashford would have entered her body like weather. Now she could notice and continue. The first debate concerned Briar Glen's Medicine Road. A merchant coalition wanted the route taxed as a trade passage. Greyhaven argued it was a medical corridor during winter months. Ashford claimed responsibility for part of the road but admitted, through Marcus, that its previous record system had failed to protect urgent deliveries. The admission passed through the room quietly. No one applauded honesty that had arrived late. Good. Emma looked at the road map, then lifted her pen. The problem is not ownership, she said. Several faces turned toward her. Not all kindly. That was fine. She had become fond of rooms that disagreed honestly. The problem is sequence. The road becomes medical only after crisis is declared. By then, carts are already delayed by toll classification. Classify the routes seasonally from first frost to thaw. Medical cargo moves first. Trade cargo waits. A merchant from Westvale frowned. That creates opportunity for false medicine claims. Yes, Emma said. So seal crates at origin clinic and verify at destination. Punish false claims after delivery, not before. A sick village should not wait because a healthy merchant fears being cheated. Ruth made a quiet, approving noise behind her. Peter wrote quickly. Across the room, Julian looked at Emma. She felt it. Did not turn. The chairman asked, "Can Greyhaven implement crate sealing?" Emma answered, "Yes." Marcus added, "Ashford can match the seal system at Briar Glen." All eyes moved to Julian. He nodded once. Ashford agrees. No argument. No performance. Emma marked the clause. The meeting continued. For hours, the room worked. Not perfectly. No council ever did. Men interrupted. Women corrected. Elders disguised pride as caution. Merchants tried to turn compassion into cost. Healers spoke too softly until Ruth told one to use her lungs or surrender them to someone with courage. Emma almost smiled into her papers. At midday, the chairman called a recess. Delegates moved into the courtyard for air and tea. Emma stayed behind to review a discrepancy in the fever cloth totals. Peter left to argue with a bridge steward. Ruth went to find food she would later call inadequate. Emma was alone for almost 2 minutes. Then Celeste Monroe approached. Slowly, not as if Emma were fragile, as if the space between them deserved honesty. "Miss Whitmore," Celeste said. Emma looked up. "Lady Monroe." Celeste accepted the title again, though it clearly hurt. "I wanted to ask whether I may speak to you." Emma placed her pen down. "You may ask." Celeste's hands tightened around her folder. That distinction landed. "Good. I am sorry," Celeste said. No preface. No explanation first. No attempt to make the apology beautiful. Emma remained still. Celeste continued, voice quiet. "I knew the council preferred me. I knew they were opening the Luna chamber. I knew they were measuring me against you in ways that benefited me. I told myself I had done nothing because I had not spoken the insult aloud." Her eyes lowered. But silence can still sit at the table and eat from the harm. Emma's chest tightened faintly. Not with love. Not with old longing. With the pain of hearing truth spoken by someone who had arrived too late to protect her from it. "Yes," Emma said. Celeste flinched, then nodded. "I will not ask you to forgive me." "Good." The answer was calm. Celeste's eyes lifted. Emma held her gaze. "I do not know what forgiveness means yet. Not for you. Not for him. Not for the room that laughed." Celeste swallowed. I understand. No, Emma said gently. You are beginning to. That is different. For a moment, neither woman spoke. Outside, voices moved through the courtyard. Cups clinked. Wheels rolled over stone. Life continued around a wound that had once felt large enough to stop the world. It had not stopped. That no longer offended Emma. Celeste opened her folder. I brought something. Not to pressure you. If you do not want it, I will take it away. Emma's body grew alert. Celeste removed a small sealed packet wrapped in plain cloth. No Ashford crest. No silver ribbon. My mother sent this through me, Celeste said. It was returned to her after you left. She said it should not remain in Ashford. Emma looked at the cloth. She knew before it opened. The Luna ring. Not the one Julian had never placed on her finger? No. Celeste unfolded the packet carefully. Inside lay the silver wolf head cloak clasp. Emma's breath caught despite herself. Not the Luna ring. The clasp. Polished still. The object she had cleaned every morning because Julian disliked dull metal before council. A ridiculous symbol. A servant's habit. A woman's devotion made small enough to fit in a palm. Celeste said. The ring remains sealed in Ashford record. Julian said it was never truly given, and therefore he had no right to return it as if it were yours to carry. But this, she looked down. This was handled by your hands more than his. Emma stared at the clasp. She had not expected pain from that. She had expected the ring to hurt. The clasp was worse, because it belonged to mornings, to before dawn, to usefulness disguised as tenderness, to loving someone through polish, tea, margins, and timing. Why bring it? Emma asked. Because I thought you should decide whether it is memory, evidence, or scrap. The answer was better than Emma wanted it to be. She reached out, then stopped. Her hand hovered above the clasp. Old Emma would have taken it, because returning a thing offered was rude. Greyhaven Emma waited to know what she wanted. Finally, she touched the silver. Cold. Smooth. No longer powerful. Just metal. I do not want it, she said. Celeste nodded quickly. I will take it. No, Emma closed the cloth around it. Sell it. Use the money for Briar Glen's Medicine Road seals. Celeste went very still. That is yours to claim. It was never mine in the way that mattered. Emma pushed the packet back. Let it become something useful without belonging to a man. Celeste's eyes filled. She bowed her head. I will do that. Emma picked up her pen again. The conversation had ended. Not cruelly. Clearly. Celeste understood and stepped away. That was respect too. A few moments later, the room shifted again. Emma did not look up immediately. She knew. Julian. Some presences were not gone from the body simply because the heart had moved them out of power. Miss Whitmore, he said. She finished marking the fever cloth total, then looked at him. Alpha King Blackthorn. He stood 2 chairs away, not too close. His hands were empty. No letter, no ring, no visible grief offered like a burden she was meant to hold. That was new. I will not take much of your recess, he said. You may speak until the chairman returns. A faint pain crossed his face. A measured allowance. A boundary. He accepted it. I wanted to confirm that Ashford will implement the seasonal medical road classification exactly as Greyhaven proposed. That should be entered through the council secretary. It will be. Emma waited. Julian looked at her as if every correct sentence cost him the wrong ones he could not say. Then he said, Your system is better than ours was. Our system had to be built without assuming one invisible woman would remember everything. The words landed. Not loud. Not sharp. True enough to leave no room for defense. Julian bowed his head once. Yes. Emma had not expected that single word to ache. It did, because there had been a time when she would have given almost anything to hear him agree when her truth was inconvenient. Now she had it, and it did not undo. That was the lesson. Too late could be sincere. Still too late. Julian continued. I read the Greyhaven fever cloth proposal. It is precise. Thank you. I should have listened to you years ago. Yes. His eyes closed briefly. She watched him absorb the answer. No softening. No mercy offered to make his regret easier. He opened his eyes. You were never nothing. The sentence entered the air between them. There it was. The reversal a younger Emma had once dreamed of. The king finally saying the opposite of the knife. The wound recognizing itself in his voice. Emma felt the old pain rise. Deep. Cold. Then it passed through a room inside her that had grown larger since Ashford. I know, she said. Julian went still. She held his gaze. I did not know that when I left. Not fully. I knew enough to go, but not enough to stop hurting from the word. Her voice remained steady. Now I know. The silence after that was not empty. It was full of all the things he could not repair. Julian's throat moved. I am sorry. Emma looked at him for a long moment. There were apologies that asked to be forgiven. This one, at least, did not reach for her. It only stood there. Late. Bare. Insufficient. Honest. I believe you, she said. His face changed. Not relief. He was wise enough now, perhaps, not to mistake belief for absolution. Thank you, he said. You should not thank me for believing a fact. A ghost of something almost human moved across his face. No, I should not. The chairman's bell rang in the courtyard. Recess ending. Julian stepped back immediately. I will not delay your work. Once, those words would have sounded absurd from him. Now they were the only possible respect. Emma gathered her papers. As she stood, Julian's gaze dropped to the lantern pin at her collar. Greyhaven suits you, he said. Emma touched the pin lightly. Yes, she said. It does. He nodded, then returned to Ashford's table. No plea, no pursuit, no hand on her arm. No Emma spoken like a claim. Emma sat as the council resumed. Her pulse was steady, not untouched. Steady. That was better. The afternoon session turned difficult quickly. A noble delegate tried to weaken the reform clause, arguing that medical corridor protection should apply only to recognized settlements, not traveler camps or temporary shelters. Emma looked at the map. People in temporary shelters become corpses permanently if medicine refuses to recognize them. The room quieted. The chairman rubbed his brow. Ruth whispered, excellent. Grim, but excellent. The clause remained. Julian supported it. Celeste added an Ashford funding pledge. Marcus volunteered patrol escort without road tax. The policy passed before sunset. When the final record was prepared, the secretary read the contributing authorities aloud. Greyhaven Clinical Records Steward Emma Whitmore. Ashford Alpha King Julian Blackthorne. Lady Celeste Monroe, Ashford Grief Office. Captain Marcus Hale. Briar Glen Clinic. For the first time, Emma heard her name in the same room as Ashford and did not feel swallowed by it. That evening, the delegates ate in the neutral hall. Long tables. Plain food. No silver ceremony. Emma sat with Greyhaven. Julian sat with Ashford. Celeste sat beside a Briar Glen healer, listening more than speaking. Ruth complained loudly about the stew until the cook threatened to hire her, which Ruth considered and then rejected because the knives were poorly kept. Emma laughed again. This time, Julian heard it. She knew because, across the hall, he looked up, but he did not approach. He only watched for 1 second, then looked away. That was perhaps the kindest thing he had done since she arrived. Letting her joy exist where he could see it without trying to enter it. After supper, Emma stepped outside into the courtyard. Spring air carried damp earth and wood smoke. The sky had softened into violet. Neutral lanterns lined the stone path. Beyond the wall, roads divided toward Ashford, Briar Glen, Greyhaven, and places she had not yet named. Ruth came to stand beside her. Well, Emma looked at her. Well, what? Did the ghost win? Emma looked toward the hall, where Julian's shadow moved behind the window. No, did you? Emma considered. Winning sounded too much like someone had to lose for her to stand upright. I remain myself, she said. Ruth nodded. Better. Yes, better. Later, as she returned to her room, Emma passed the council record board. The new medical corridor policy had already been posted. Her name appeared near the top. Clear. Official. Unhidden. She stood there for a moment and read it as if reading someone else's future. Emma Whitmore. Not nothing. Never nothing. No longer needing the man who wounded her to be the one who proved it false. That was freedom in its quietest form. Not the absence of memory. Not the absence of pain. The absence of permission. She did not need Julian's apology to continue. She did not need Celeste's regret to soften. She did not need Ashford's reforms to justify leaving. She had gone because staying would have made a lie of her soul. Now, under neutral lanterns, with her work signed into law and the roads protected before winter could test them again, Emma finally understood the shape of what she had done. She had not disappeared. She had removed herself from a sentence that was never true. And in doing so, she had forced every room that once diminished her to learn how loudly absence could speak. By morning, she would return to Greyhaven, to her office, to the canal mist. to Ruth's terrible coffee and Peter's impossible ledgers, to work that used her mind without consuming her life. Behind her, Ashford would return west with its reforms, its regret, its canceled silver presentation, its empty Luna chamber, and a king who had finally learned to step back. That was enough. It had to be. Emma touched the lantern pin at her collar and walked toward her room. No one followed. No one called her back. No one needed her before sunrise. And for once, the silence did not feel like abandonment. It felt like peace. Emma Whitmore left the neutral council before sunrise, but this time, leaving did not feel like escape. That was how she knew the road had changed. The carriage waited in the gray morning courtyard with Greyhaven's plain lantern mark on the side. Peter Alden loaded the record cases. Ruth Calder stood near the steps, wrapped in a dark shawl, scolding a stable boy for packing the food basket beneath the ink box. "Soup does not belong under bureaucracy," Ruth said. The boy looked frightened enough to agree with anything. Emma stood near the council house doors with her cloak fastened at her throat and the lantern pin resting against her collarbone. Spring mist gathered along the road. No banners moved. No court watched. No man waited at the steps to ask her to stay where she had already decided not to belong. Then Marcus Hale approached. He stopped at a respectful distance. "Miss Whitmore." "Captain Hale." He held out a sealed folder. Copies of the final medical corridor agreements. Ashford's signed commitments included. Emma accepted the folder. "Thank you." Marcus lingered. Not because he wanted something. Because some griefs took longer to know where to stand. "I should have spoken sooner," he said. Emma looked at him. The old version of her might have comforted him immediately. She might have said he had done what he could, that loyalty to a king complicated things, that not every silence was betrayal. Some of that might even have been true. But comfort had once been the tax everyone placed on her pain. So she did not pay it automatically. "Yes," she said. "You should have." Marcus lowered his eyes. "I know." The honesty sat between them without decoration. Then Emma added, softer. "But you spoke when it mattered enough to stop him from chasing me like property." Marcus's jaw tightened. "I wish the bar had been higher." "So do I." For a moment, they stood inside that truth. Then Marcus bowed. Not to a wounded woman. To a professional equal whose work had changed law. "Greyhaven is fortunate," he said. Emma's fingers tightened slightly around the folder. "So am I." He stepped back. Near the far arch, Celeste Monroe waited with no folder, no silver, no excuse. She did not approach until Emma looked at her. "Miss Whitmore," Celeste said. "Lady Monroe." Celeste accepted the distance more easily now. "The cloak clasp will be sold today," she said. "The money will fund the first road seal station at Briar Glen. I wanted you to know." Emma nodded. "Good." Celeste hesitated. "I also asked the Grief Office to remove my name from any Luna review until I have completed a full year of public service." Emma studied her. That was not redemption. Not yet. But it was direction. "Then do the work," Emma said. Celeste's mouth tightened with emotion. "I will." Emma believed that she meant it, meaning it was only the beginning. Perhaps Celeste knew that now. That was enough for the morning. Ruth called from the carriage. "Emma, if we stand here much longer, men will begin making farewell speeches and I refuse to age through those." Emma almost smiled. "I am coming." She turned toward the carriage, then stopped. Julian Blackthorne stood near the council house entrance. He had not interrupted. That mattered. He wore black, as he always had, but without the hard shine of ceremony. No crown, no silver chain, no Ashford display. Only a man standing in the cold morning with eyes that had learned too late how not to command. Emma faced him. He did not step closer. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "Alpha King Blackthorne." The title no longer hurt. That surprised her. It sounded like what he was. Not what he had been to her. Not what she once hoped he might become. Just his title. A fact. Julian looked toward the carriage, then back to her. "Greyhaven expects you." "Yes." "Ashford will honor the agreement." "I know. The penalties are clear." For the first time, something almost like a smile moved through his grief. "You wrote them that way." "I did." The small exchange should have been impossible. Perhaps that was why it felt clean. There was no tenderness pretending to be a bridge. No plea disguised as concern. No apology sharpened into expectation. Only two people standing after the damage. One free enough to leave. The other changed enough not to stop her. Julian's voice lowered. "I once thought your silence meant you would stay." Emma felt the sentence enter her. Not as a wound. As record. Yes. I was wrong. Yes. He breathed once. I thought needing you was the same as valuing you. The morning mist moved between them. Emma's hands remained still. You are not the first man to confuse the two, she said. No, but you were the one I loved. There it was. Not accusation. Not offering. A truth laid down because it no longer begged to be answered. Julian closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the regret in his face was quiet and complete. I know. Good. At last, he knew something without asking her to teach it with more suffering. Emma looked past him toward the council house windows, where yesterday her name had been read into law. She thought of the girl she had been in Ashford, waiting for him to name her place. Waiting beside bitter tea. Waiting through council laughter. Waiting until a sentence behind a door turned waiting into ash. She wished she could tell that woman the truth. Not that it would stop hurting. Not that the man would regret it. Not that another room would eventually speak her name. Only this. Leaving will feel like death for a while. Go anyway. Julian spoke again. I will not write to you unless council work requires it. Emma looked back at him. Good. I will not send writers. Good. I will not ask you to return. That sentence changed the air. Not because she had feared he would. Because a part of her still remembered wanting to be asked, once. Long ago. Before the door. Before nothing. Before Greyhaven taught her that being wanted too late was not the same as being loved well. Emma nodded. Then you have learned one thing correctly. His mouth tightened. Yes. Ruth's voice cut across the courtyard. Emma, the soup is now in political danger. Peter looked mortified beside the carriage. Emma turned slightly. I should go. Julian stepped back. Not away in anger. Back to clear the path. Yes. She walked toward the carriage. Each step was steady. No one stopped her. At the carriage door, she paused and looked once more at the neutral council house. Not at Julian first. At the place where her work had stood on its own. Then she entered. Ruth settled beside her with a satisfied huff. Peter climbed in across from them, holding the record cases as if they contained crown jewels instead of routes, seals, and medicine schedules. The carriage began to move. Through the window, Emma saw Ashford's delegation remain in the courtyard. Marcus bowed. Celeste stood still. Julian did not move at all. He watched the carriage leave. This time, Emma led him. Being seen no longer meant being trapped. The road east opened under pale spring light. For a while, no one spoke. Ruth eventually unwrapped a piece of bread and handed it to Emma. You handled that without making a fool of yourself or anyone else, she said. High praise. The highest I give before breakfast. Emma took the bread. Peter cleared his throat. The clinic board will want a report by tomorrow. Of course they will. And the city council asked whether you would consider presenting the medical corridor structure publicly. Emma looked at him. Publicly? Yes. Under your title. Clinical Records Steward. Emma still felt the weight of it sometimes. Not heavy like a chain. Heavy like a tool she was learning to use. I will present, she said. Ruth nodded. Good. Wear the green dress. Men listen better when confused by competence in good fabric. Emma laughed. Soft at first. Then fully. The sound filled the carriage. No one treated it like a miracle. That made it easier to keep. By afternoon, they reached Briar Glen. Nora Bell met them at the clinic gate with Hannah beside her and Aaron sitting on a bench in the sun, his cane across his knees. The first shipment of road seal supplies had already arrived, stacked beside the medicine shed in clean wooden crates. Celeste had moved quickly. Good. Let the class become infrastructure. Let the old symbol of Emma's invisible service become a system that served people without requiring any woman to disappear. Nora hugged Emma without asking complicated questions. Emma allowed it, then laughed when Ruth complained that sentiment delayed lunch. Hannah showed her the new seal stamp. A simple mark. Lantern over road. Emma touched it with one finger. A lantern. How strange that the symbol had followed her. Not wolves. Not crowns. Light carried by hand. That evening, she stayed in the same small room above the clinic where she had slept after leaving Ashford. The bed was narrow. The window still faced the bridge. Rain had marked the sill. The note Hannah once left her was gone now, safely tucked in Emma's Greyhaven desk. She stood by the window and looked at the road. One path west, one path east. She remembered the woman who had lain there in muddy clothes, whispering no to the part of herself trained to answer. That woman was still inside her. Emma loved her suddenly. Fiercely, not for being strong, for leaving before strength knew what came next. The next morning, she returned to Greyhaven. Lantern Street was loud with market carts, wet wheels, and early vendors arguing over prices. Ruth's apothecary smelled of mint, soap, and dust. The floorboard near Emma's door complained when she stepped on it. Home did not have to be grand. It only had to stop asking her to vanish. At the clinic, her office waited. Narrow, crowded, filled with ledgers that needed correction and people who would interrupt her before noon. On the desk lay a new brass nameplate. Ruth denied involvement immediately. Peter denied it badly. Emma touched the engraved letters. Emma Whitmore, clinical records steward. Beneath it, someone had added a second line. Medical corridor architect. She stared. Peter said quickly, the board voted. Technically, the title is honorary, but the authority is attached to the corridor review committee, so it is practical, not decorative. Emma looked at him. He stopped talking. Ruth muttered. Men explain gifts into paperwork when frightened. Emma sat slowly behind the desk. For years, she had worked under names that were not hers. His aide. His useful girl. The one who knows where things are. The one who keeps him steady. Nothing. Now the room gave her 2 lines. Both earned. Both visible. Her throat tightened. She did not cry. Not because she was above it. Because the feeling was wider than tears. Thank you, she said. Peter nodded. Ruth waved one hand and turned toward the shelves before tenderness could embarrass her. Work found Emma immediately. A fever cluster near the South Canal. A missing shipment of willow cloth. A widower whose credit had been filed under the wrong child's name. A dispute over whether traveler camps counted under the new corridor protections. Emma opened her ledger, dipped her pen, began. Hours passed. No one asked if she was grateful enough to work late. No one assumed she would. At 6, Ruth knocked on the doorframe. Food. In a moment. No. That is how women become ghosts in offices. Food. Emma looked at the unfinished page. Then closed the ledger. A small choice. A new habit. She ate. That night, after the clinic quieted, Emma walked to the North Canal Bridge alone. The same place where Peter had given her the first contract folder. The water moved beneath the lamps, dark and steady. Spring had softened the air. Somewhere in the distance, a fiddle played badly and enthusiastically. Emma rested her hands on the railing. She thought of Ashford. The black marble. The private kitchen. The Luna chamber. The council door. Julian's voice. She means nothing to me. The sentence still existed. But it no longer lived inside her as a law. It was evidence now. Evidence of what she had survived. Evidence of why she left. Evidence of the kind of room she would never again enter as a woman begging to be named. A small folded paper rested in her cloak pocket. The final council agreement. At the bottom, signatures lined the page. Julian Blackthorne. Celeste Monroe. Marcus Hale. Peter Alden. Emma Whitmore. Her name did not erase his. It did not need to. It stood among them, equal in ink, separate in life. That was enough. More than enough. A young mother crossed the bridge carrying a sleeping child against her shoulder. She recognized Emma and stopped. Miss Whitmore. Yes. The fever cloth came early this time. They said it was the new corridor rule. Emma looked at the child's flushed but peaceful face. I am glad. The woman shifted the child carefully. Thank you. No title. No grand rescue. No applause. Just a mother going home with medicine arriving before grief. Emma watched her disappear down the lantern-lit street. Then she smiled. Fully. Without surprise this time. The next dawn, Emma woke before the bells. For a moment, old memory reached for her. Blue flame. Bitter tea. Julian's study. Council notes before sunrise. She opened her eyes to Greyhaven light instead. Canal mist. Ruth arguing downstairs. A clinic ledger waiting under her own name. Emma lay still. No one needed her to keep a king human. But people needed systems that treated their lives as urgent before tragedy made them visible. That was work she could choose. Work she could leave at 6 when Ruth yelled. Work that respected her enough to survive without swallowing her whole. She rose, dressed in the green gown Ruth insisted made officials nervous, pinned the lantern near her collar, and walked to the clinic. Peter was already waiting with 3 folders. Ruth stood behind him holding coffee that smelled burned. Morning, Peter said. The city council moved your presentation to the main hall. Larger attendance. Emma looked at the folders. Then at the street beyond the clinic windows, where Greyhaven woke in imperfect noise. Once, Rooms full of people had made her think of judgment. Now they made her think of records waiting to be corrected. Then we should make the presentation clear, she said. Ruth handed her the coffee. Terrible first. Clarity after suffering. Emma took it, tasted it, winced. This is punishment. This is civic preparation. Emma laughed again, then went to her office. On her desk, the brass nameplate caught the morning light. Emma Whitmore, clinical records steward, medical corridor architect. She touched it once, not to make sure it was real, to acknowledge that she was. Somewhere far west, an alpha king lived with regret and reforms. Perhaps he slept better now. Perhaps he did not. Perhaps Celeste was learning service without silver. Perhaps Ashford was becoming less cruel in rooms where Emma no longer had to stand. She wished them growth. Not return. Not closeness. Growth. Then she let the West be West. She opened the first folder, marked the urgent line in red, and began the day as herself. Not the woman behind the king. Not the girl who mistook being needed for being chosen. Not the quiet shadow who waited for the right time to be loved. Emma Whitmore. The woman who heard, "She means nothing to me," left before morning, and built a life where the word nothing could no longer find a place to land.